The instruments had already declared the human dead twice, and reconstructor Vole was watching them try to do it a third time. He stood at the foot of the stasis cradle in the deep ward of the conquered trauma ring, 3 limbs folded against his thorax and the 4th hovering over the sap pressure console, and he read the failure the way a mender learns to read failure, not in one number, but in the way all of them lean together toward the same edge. The membrane conductivity line had gone flat and stayed flat. The settle rhythm, the slow tidal pulse that every living body in the Concord kept, whether it was Threnn or Osherin or the pale burrowing folk of the outer stations, showed nothing but noise. And the core temperature readout, the one that should have told him whether the patient was cooling into the final quiet, had thrown up an error the machine had no protocol for: too high. The number sat there in the pale amber of the display, absurd, twice what any surviving body should carry, and the console flagged it the way it flagged corpses left too long under a heat lamp. "Call it," said Prime Mender, a chai's tune from across the cradle. Her voice was the flat, sap-cooled voice she used when a death was already decided and only the paperwork remained. Second failure confirmed. The subject did not hold the reconstruction. Vole did not call it. He looked at the human instead. She was small on the cradle, smaller than the Threnn were, and they were not a large people. Her frame would have fit inside the ribcage of an Osherin laborer with room to spare. The trauma that had come in with her was the kind the ring saw perhaps twice a season, the kind that made even senior menders go quiet in the scrub chamber afterward. A pressure hull had folded on her out past the transfer lanes, in one of the derelict recovery jobs the human salvage crews took because nobody else would, and it had folded the way hulls fold when the metal is old and the seals are older, all at once, without warning, with a body inside it. When the courier skiff had brought her through the lock, she had been a ruin. Left forelimb crushed to the second joint and hanging by a cord of tissue. Thorax stove in on the same side. 3 of the internal bellows, Vole had no better word for the pink human breathing organs, torn and filling. A long opening down the flank where a spar had gone in and come out. Sap everywhere, except that it was not sap. It was the red iron-heavy fluid the humans carried, and there had been so much of it on the cradle liner that the drainage gutters had clogged. By every standard the Concord taught, she should have been dead in the lock. She had not been. That was the first thing about her that had made Vole's spine plates itch. They had done the reconstruction anyway, because the still-hand creed did not permit a mender to refuse a body that still moved, and hers had still moved, faintly, the small red pump in her chest still shuddering when they cut her free of the wreckage. So they had held her in the stasis field and gone in the way the Concord went in, slowly, deliberately, sealing rather than stitching, cooling the tissue to slow the bleeding, easing the crushed bellows back into shape and pinning them, closing the flank with a bonding resin that would hold a Threnn wound shut for a full season, while the body did the patient, glacial work of knitting itself. And then, an eighth of a rotation into the recovery hold, the instruments had begun to scream. Not the alarm for a dying patient. The Concord had a specific alarm for that, a low descending tone that Vole had heard too many times and had learned to hate. This was the other one. The high, stuttering, 3-note alarm that every mender was trained to fear more than any other, because it meant the one thing Threnn medicine had never in all its long, careful history learned to stop. The spreading. That was the word. In the old tongue it was a longer word, a word that meant something closer to the growth that does not answer the body, but everyone just said the spreading. It was what happened when cells forgot the slow law that governed them, when tissue began to divide and pile upon itself with no signal telling it to stop, when the careful architecture of a living thing began to consume itself from the inside out. On a Threnn it was uniformly, absolutely fatal. There was no procedure. There was no drug. When a mender saw the spreading begin in a patient, the only thing left to do was ease the pain and record the hour. Vole had recorded 11 such hours in his career. He remembered all of them. The alarm was because the human's wounds were closing. Reconstructor. Toon's fourth limb clicked once against the console rim, a small, impatient sound. I said call it. The reconstruction has failed. You are watching a corpse undergo the spreading. This is why we do not accept Verge-class bodies into a conquered ring. You know this. Everyone in this ring knows this. Their tissue is not stable. It was never going to hold. The flank seal, Vole said. What of it? It's gone. He gestured, and the overhead field brought the human's flank into magnification above the cradle, a slow-turning image the color of a wound. The bonding resin they had laid down the flank, a full hand span of it, enough to hold a body shut for a season, was not holding a body shut. It had lifted. It sat in a curled amber flake against the human's gray-pale skin, pushed off from underneath, and where it had been there was no longer an open wound. There was a raised red line, angry and wet but closed, sealed, not by the resin, by the human. In an eighth of a rotation. Toon went quiet. Across the cradle her ocular membrane cycled once, twice, the Threnn tell for a mind rapidly discarding what it had expected to see and finding nothing to replace it with. That is the spreading, she said at last, but the certainty had thinned out of her voice. Accelerated. I have never seen it move that fast, but that is what that is. The tissue is not healing, Vole, it is proliferating. You are looking at the beginning of a malignancy that will consume the entire torso before the next meal bell. Cool her down. Full stasis, deepest field we have. If we drop the metabolic rate far enough, we can at least slow it. Keep her intact long enough for the pathology guild to take samples. This will be a teaching case. Vole moved to the field controls. His hands knew the sequence. Every mender's hands knew the sequence. You learned it before you were allowed to hold a blade. And he brought the stasis field down over the human like a tide coming in, cooling the cradle, cooling the air, dropping the temperature of the small, ruined body toward the deep cold where all processes slowed and the spreading, if it could be slowed at all, would slow. The human's core temperature readout did not drop. He checked the field. The field was live. The frost was already blooming on the cradle rails, the ambient sensors reading the cold correctly. But the number that was the human, the impossible, corpse-flagged, twice-too-high number, held exactly where it had been. As if the body underneath the cold were producing heat as fast as the field could pull it away. As if it were a small furnace that had decided, without consulting anyone, to keep burning. Deeper, Toon said. He took the field deeper. It was already at the setting they used for Osheran patients, whose blood ran colder than a Threnn's, and who could be held in a chill that would have killed a mender. He took it past that, into the range reserved for tissue samples and the recently dead, a cold that no living conquered body could survive. The number did not drop. It rose. By a fraction, a single mark on the amber scale, the kind of change the console usually smoothed out as noise, but Vole was watching it and he saw it, and he understood with a cold certainty of his own that the more they pulled heat out of the human, the harder her body pushed back. He had spent his whole life inside the conquered's central article of faith, which was that a body is a fragile and grudging thing that must be coaxed toward survival against its own weakness, that healing is slow because life is slow, because life is delicate, because the universe is patient in its unmaking of everything that lives. He had never in his life met a body that argued. Prime, he said, the cold is making it worse. That's not possible. I am telling you what the instrument tells me. The colder the field, the higher her core runs. She is fighting it. A corpse does not fight, Toon said, but she came around the cradle to stand beside him and read the number for herself, and Vole watched her ocular membrane cycle again, faster this time, and he knew she was seeing it too. The number climbed a second mark. On the magnified flank, the raised red line was paler now, flatter, a day's worth of a Threnn's healing accomplished in the time it had taken them to argue about the field. Take it off, Toon said quietly. The field. Take it off. Whatever it is doing, it is not slowing it, and I will not have the guild reviewing a recording of me driving a body into deep cold while its readings climb. Take the field off and get the pathologist down here and get an elder on the relay. And Vol, she paused, and for the first time since the human had come through the lock, the prime mender of the conquered trauma ring sounded like something other than certain. Get me a second sap pressure cuff, a calibrated one, because either the machine is broken or that thing on my cradle is doing something I do not have a word for, and I would very much prefer the machine. Vol lifted the field. The frost on the rails began to retreat, and the human, the corpse, the failed reconstruction, the thing the instruments had pronounced dead twice, opened her eyes. They were dark, the human's eyes, dark and wet and startlingly quick, and they went first to the ceiling, then to the magnified image of her own flank turning slowly in the field above her, then down to the two Threnn standing over her cradle with their three limbs folded startled posture that no human could have read, but that any mender would have recognized instantly as fear. She looked at them for a long moment. Her breathing organs dragged in air with a wet catch on one side, the crushed side, and Vol saw the readout for the damaged bellows and saw that it too was wrong. The tear was smaller than it had been, the fill draining, the pink tissue reknitting along the line where the spar had gone through. The human wet her lips. When she spoke, the translator patch on Vol's collar took the sounds and turned them into flat conquered speech a half beat behind her mouth, so that he heard the meaning arrive just after he saw her make it. Did it work? She said. Neither mender answered. Vol was not sure either of them could have. The pilot, the human said. The word came through the patch with a cost in it. There was a pilot in the front seat, older guy. Did he make it out? You are speaking, Toon said. It was not an answer. It was the closest thing to shock Vol had ever heard from her. Usually do. The human's dark eyes moved to the flank image again, to the closing wound, and something crossed her face that the patch could not translate, and that Vol would spend a long time afterward trying to name. It was not fear. He knew fear. He had seen a great deal of it in this ring, on every kind of face the conquered treated, and this was not it. If anything, it looked like a person checking a familiar thing and finding it where she had left it. That's healing up fast, she said mildly, as if remarking on weather. Even for me. What did you people do? We sealed you, Vol said. His own voice sounded strange to him. The flank, the bellows, the breathing organs. We cooled the tissue to slow the bleeding. We did not expect, he stopped. He did not know how to say, we did not expect you to survive the lock to a patient who had not only survived it but was now asking after her crewmate in a tone of mild inconvenience. You cooled me down. The human's mouth moved. On a Threnn the expression would have meant nothing. The patch oddly offered him a word for it anyway, smile. Yeah, don't do that, feels like drowning, body doesn't like it. She turned her head slowly, taking in the deep ward around her, the cradle banks, the field emitters, the pale Threnn light that the humans always said was the color of a headache. Where am I? This isn't a human station. You're not, I don't know what you are. You are aboard the conquered trauma ring at Waystation Hesperval, Toon said, recovering some of her flatness. You are Threnn Medicine's patient. Your vessel was destroyed in the recovery lanes, and a courier brought you to us because we were nearest, and because our creed does not permit refusal. You have sustained catastrophic, she stopped, and looked at the flank image, at the wound that was no longer catastrophic, and could not finish the sentence she had begun 10,000 times in her career. Catastrophic, the human agreed helpfully. Yeah, felt like it. She lifted her head off the cradle, and both menders flinched, actually flinched, a full-body clench that Vol was ashamed of and could not have stopped, because she was not supposed to be able to lift her head, because the reconstruction they had done should have left her immobile in the field for a season, and she raised it as if she were getting up from a nap. She looked down the length of her own body at the crushed forelimb, the one that had come in hanging by a cord, the one they had pinned and splinted and privately written off. Then she lay her head back down. My arm's messed up, she said. Your forelimb was crushed to the second joint, Vole said. We were not able to save it. We pinned it to preserve the tissue for later removal, he did not say. It will need to come off. The human considered this. Her dark, quick eyes found Vole's and held them, and he had the deeply strange sensation of being measured by something that had decided, on very little evidence, that it did not need to be afraid of him, and had moved on to more practical concerns. Give it a few days, she said. Then she closed her eyes, and her breathing settled into a slow, deep rhythm, and every instrument in the deep ward began, quietly and all at once, to record numbers that Threnn medicine had no framework to contain. Vole stood over her for a long moment. Behind him, he heard Toon open the relay channel to the elder's station, heard her request a priority consult in the clipped tone that meant she did not expect to be doubted, heard her describe the case in the flat clinical language of the conquered, verge-class patient, catastrophic multi-system trauma, reconstruction nominal, presenting accelerated uncontrolled tissue proliferation resistant to deep cold stasis. And he knew that every word of it was wrong. That they were about to bring the full weight of the conquered's pathology down on this small sleeping body under the assumption that it was dying of the worst thing they knew, and that not one of them, not the elders, not the pathologists, not the Prime herself, had yet understood the single fact that Vole was only beginning to understand as he stood there watching the human's crushed chest rise and fall. She was not dying. She was getting better. And the instruments, calibrated across 400 years to the slow, grudging biology of a gentle world, had read the fastest healing they had ever recorded and filed it under death, because in all their long, careful history, the conquered had never once needed a word for a body that improved. Vole reached out and very carefully turned the failure alarm off. The three-note tone stopped. The deep ward went quiet except for the wet catch of the human's breathing, which even now, even as he listened, was catching a little less on each pull. He should have been relieved. Instead, he found himself thinking about the recovery lanes past the transfer routes, the dead hulls out there in the dark that no sane species would crawl into for salvage, and about the small, warm furnace of a body on his cradle that had crawled into one anyway, and about what it must mean that her people did this for a living, that the humans looked at a thing that would kill anyone else and saw a job. He filed the thought where he filed things he did not want the Prime to see, and went to fetch the calibrated cuff. The pathologist arrived on the next skiff and did not believe any of it. His name was Sethric All, and he was old even by the standards of the guild, his spine plates gone the pale gray of a mender who had spent 60 years reading the dead, and he came into the deep ward already shaking his broad, flat head at the summary he had read on the way in. Accelerated proliferation resistant to stasis, he said, before he had so much as looked at the patient. Prime, with respect, that is not a diagnosis, that is a machine fault. A body cannot generate heat against a deep cold field. A wound cannot close in an eighth of a rotation. What you have is a calibration error and a corpse, and the corpse has fooled a room full of tired menders at the end of a long rotation. Show me the patient. I will show you the machine that lied to you. Vole brought him to the cradle. The human was awake again. She had, in the interval, discovered that the cradle had a control to raise the head plane, and had raised it, so that she was half-sitting, and she had discovered the ration dispenser arm that the deep ward kept for conscious patients, and had worked out how to make it produce the pale Threnn nutrient paste that no non-Threnn had ever been known to tolerate, and she was eating it. Slowly, with the crushed forelimb still splinted across her lap, using the intact hand, she was spooning gray conquered paste into her mouth and swallowing it and reaching for more, and the sight of it stopped Sethric All in the middle of the deep ward floor, as though he had walked into a field emitter. That is our recovery paste, he said. It's not great, the human agreed. But I haven't eaten since the wreck and I'm not proud. She looked up at the new Threnn, at the pale ancient spine plates, and gave the small mouth movement the patch called a smile. You the specialist. They keep bringing in bigger and older ones. I figure that means it's going well or going badly. Which is it? Sethric All did not answer her. He came to the cradle and he looked at the flank, where the raised red line had, in the time since Vole had last looked, faded to a thin pink seam. He looked at the breathing readout, where the torn bellows now read as merely bruised. He picked up the human's crushed forelimb, gently, in the way the guild taught, and he studied the splint and the pinning, and then he did something Vole had never seen a pathologist do to a live patient. He peeled back the edge of the splint and looked underneath, at the second joint, at the place where the limb had been hanging by a cord when she came through the lock. He was quiet for a long time. "Reconstructor Vole," he said at last without looking up, "bring me the intake imaging, the full set from the lock." Vole brought it. Sethric All set the intake image beside the live one, the ruin beside the seam, the hanging limb beside the limb that was. Vole saw it now, saw it the way you see a thing once someone older and more careful has gone still in front of it, the limb that was reconnecting. Not healed, not whole, but at the second joint where there had been a severed cord of tissue and a gap, there was now a bridge. Thin, red, new, reaching across the gap from both sides, building. "Prime Mender," said Sethric All, and his voice had lost all of its certainty and all of its scorn, and what was left underneath was very old and very quiet. "The machine is not lying to you." "Then what," said HFYStories, "is it telling us?" The old pathologist set down the human's forelimb with a gentleness that was almost reverence, and he looked at the small, warm creature eating Threnn paste on the cradle, and he said the thing that Vole had already begun to understand and had not wanted to say out loud. "It's telling us she's rebuilding it, the limb. Her body is regrowing the limb." He turned to the Prime and his ocular membranes had gone very still. "We have no word for this because it has never happened, not in the Concord, not in the record. A body does not do this. And this one is doing it while eating our paste and asking after her crewmate, and if the instruments are correct, and I no longer believe they are not, she will be finished before the guild finishes arguing about whether it is possible." The human swallowed another spoonful of paste. "Told him a few days," she said, "to no one in particular, and reached for more." The elders convened by relay before the next meal bell, which told Vole more about the state of the ring than any instrument could have. Elders did not convene quickly. The Conquered had survived 400 years by being slow, by treating haste as a symptom rather than a virtue, and an elder who agreed to a priority consult inside a single rotation was an elder who had read the case file and gone cold. They ran the consult in the observation gallery above the deep ward, where the senior menders could watch the patient through the field glass while the elders' images hung in the air on the relay. There were 3 of them. Elder Mender Van of the Central Ring, whose name Vole had heard spoken with a kind of reverence since he was an apprentice. A xenobiologist named Kresh, who had spent most of a lifetime cataloging the biologies of the Verge-class worlds without ever, as far as anyone knew, having stood in a room with a live specimen of one. And a third whose title the relay rendered only as keeper of the difficult record, which Vole did not understand and did not like. "Show me the proliferation," said Kresh. Sethric All showed them. He had in the intervening time done what pathologists do. He had taken samples, tiny ones, from the closing flank and the reaching limb, and he had put them under the deep field and watched them, and what he had watched had made the old scorn drain entirely out of him and leave behind a careful, frightened precision. He put the recordings on the relay now, human tissue at the cellular scale, dividing. And it was dividing fast. Faster than any Threnn tissue had ever been recorded dividing, faster than the malignancies that killed his people, cells splitting and splitting in a rhythm that should have meant death. But it was not the rhythm of the spreading. Vole had recorded 11 of those hours. He knew what the spreading looked like, the ugly formless pile of it, tissue with no plan, growth that answered nothing. This was not that. The human cells divided fast, but they divided towards something. They laid down along the line of the old wound like laborers along a survey stake. They built the limb back joint by joint, in order and shape, and where a Threnn malignancy would have made a shapeless mass, this made a forelimb correct, aligned, a little at a time but never once wrong. "That is not the spreading," said Elder Van very quietly. "No," said Sethric All. "It is the opposite of the spreading. The spreading is growth without a plan. This is growth with a plan, executed at a speed our medicine has no defense against and no need for. Elder, I have spent 60 years learning the ways a body comes apart. I am looking at a body that puts itself back together, and I do not have the training to understand it, because no Threnn has ever needed to." "The core temperature," said Kresh, "it held against deep cold." "It rose against deep cold." That was Toon. "The colder we drove the field, the more heat she made. We stopped before we learned where it ended. I did not want to find out." The xenobiologist's image leaned forward, and Vole watched something move behind the old ocular membranes that he recognized, because he had felt it himself standing over the cradle. The vertigo of a person whose entire map of the world has just been shown to have a blank place on it where they had always drawn solid ground. "Where is the specimen from?" Kresh asked. "Which Verge world?" The keeper of the difficult record answered before anyone else could. "She is from the third world of a yellow star in the outer catalogs. The salvage crews call it home. We have it filed under Registry Ashen 9. A pause. "You will not have heard the human name for it. They call it Earth." "Ashen 9, Kresh repeated, and made a sound Vole had never heard an elder make, a low sound with a great weariness in it. "Of course she is from Ashen 9. Do you know what that classification means, Prime? Do the menders in your ring know? It is not a number in a catalog. Ashen 9 is one of 9 worlds in the entire surveyed volume that we mark not by what lives there, but by what it would take to live there. The gravity that would fold a Threnn skeleton. The air thick with a gas that corrodes most tissue on contact. She breathes it, she requires it. Temperature swings in a single rotation that exceed the range any conquered body could survive. Impacts from the sky, rocks the size of stations, often enough that the fossil record of the place is a record of near extinctions, one after another, and every time the thing that survives comes back harder. Predators at every scale. Disease that would empty a conquered ring in a rotation. We did not classify Earth as difficult prime mender. We classified it as a world that should not, by any model we possess, have produced a technological species at all. And it produced one anyway. And the one it produced is on your cradle, eating your recovery paste and regrowing a limb, and you are asking me why the instruments called it death." The gallery was silent. "Because," Kresh finished more gently, "on any world the conquered comes from, a body that healed that fast would be death. Uncontrolled growth is the enemy that has hunted us since before we had medicine. We built 400 years of it around slowing the body down, holding it still, coaxing it gently through a healing that takes seasons because on our worlds anything faster kills you. And then a body walks in from a world where slow healing is a death sentence, where if your wound does not close before the next thing finds you, you are eaten, and it heals the way its world taught it to heal, and every alarm we own goes off, because we built the alarms to warn us about the thing that world made ordinary." Down on the cradle, unaware, the human had finished the paste and was working the splint off her regrowing forelimb with the patient, absent-minded persistence of someone picking at a scab, and Vole wanted to go down and stop her and did not, because he no longer had any confidence that he knew what would help her and what would hurt. "What is her name?" Elder Van asked. Vole realized no one had asked. In all the hours since the lock, in all the samples and the readings and the alarms, no mender had asked the patient her name. He touched the relay to the deep ward channel and spoke down into it, and his own voice came out of the speaker beside her cradle so that she looked up. "Patient," he said, "the menders wish to know your designation." The human's mouth moved. "My what?" Your name? Mara, she said. Mara Quinlan. Salvage-tech, second class, deepwater recovery out of the Halden yards. And before you ask, no, they don't know I'm here, because our beacon went down with the boat. So at some point somebody's going to want to send a message. But I figure that can wait until I know whether I'm keeping the arm. She held up the forelimb, the splint dangling loose now. The second joint bridged with new red tissue that had not been there a rotation ago, and turned it in the pale light with what Vole could only read as professional interest. Which, honestly, is looking pretty good. Mara Quinlan, said Elder Van, and the way the ancient mender said the human name, slowly, carefully, as if setting a stone into place, made Vole understand that whatever the ring had thought it was doing when it accepted this patient, it had not been doing that at all. Keep her comfortable. Take every reading the ring can take. Do not attempt to slow the process again. You have seen what that costs. And Prime Mender. The elder's image turned toward Toon. Do not, under any circumstance, let this patient leave the ring until the guild has understood what we are looking at. Whatever else she is now the most important body in the Concord's medicine, and I will not have her walk out of a lock and back onto a salvage boat before we have learned what she is here to teach us. The relay closed. Toon stood at the field glass for a long moment, looking down at Mara Quinlan, who had got the splint entirely off now and was flexing the new joint, slowly, wincing when it caught, working it the way a person works a stiff hand on a cold morning. Do not let her leave, Toon repeated softly, as if we could stop her. She turned to Vole. You have been steady through this, reconstructor, steadier than I have. So I am going to give you the patient, and I am going to give you the young one, Isa, to run your samples, and I am going to go and compose the message to the human authorities that I have been dreading since the lock, because whatever the elders want, at some point, a salvage company is going to come looking for their second-class tech, and I would rather they find her healthy and well-recorded than find that the Concord kept her. She paused at the gallery door. Watch her, Vole. Not the instruments, her. The instruments have been wrong since the lock, and I no longer trust them. Watch what she does. And write it all down. Isa was young, a full apprentice, her spine plates still dark, her hands quick and nervous, and she was terrified of the human in a way that Vole found he had already moved past without noticing. They say she regrew part of a limb, Isa said in the scrub chamber, fitting the sample cases into their frame with hands that shook just slightly. In a rotation. Reconstructor, that can't be right. That's the spreading. Everyone knows the spreading kills you. And if it doesn't kill her, then what does that make her? What kind of a body just? A stable one, Vole said. Watch her. You'll see. He brought Isa into the deep ward, and Mara Quinlan looked up at them. At the young, frightened apprentice and the mender who had turned off her death alarm, and she seemed to take in Isa's shaking hands and her dark new plates, and the way she held herself half behind Vole, and something in the human's face softened. Hey, Mara said to the apprentice, you're new. Isa froze. It's okay, Mara said. I'm not going to do anything. I'm mostly going to lie here and heal, which apparently is the scary part for you people. And I'm sorry about that, I really am, but there's not a lot I can do about it. It's just what my body does. She shifted on the cradle, easing the regrown forelimb across her lap, and Vole saw the wince and the way she breathed through it, and understood for the first time that the healing was not free, that it cost her something, that under the mild flat calm there was a body burning fuel at a rate that should not have been sustainable. You want to take some blood? Mara asked. That's what the samples are, right? Go ahead. I've got plenty. Apparently I make it faster than I lose it, which is news to me too, but here we are. Isa took the samples. Her hands steadied as she worked, the way a mender's hands always steadied when the training took over, and Mara watched her the whole time with those dark, quick eyes, and when it was done she said, see. Nothing to it. And Isa gave a small, startled ripple of her plates that was the apprentice equivalent of a nervous laugh, and Vole thought, there it is. The thing the elders were afraid of, and the thing the instruments could not read. Not the healing. the steadiness. The human lying gutted on an alien cradle, surrounded by a species that had twice pronounced her dead and was now taking her blood to study what kind of monster she might be, and she was calming down the frightened apprentice. They ran the samples through the deep field, and the deep field told them things that Vole wrote down carefully and did not fully believe. The human's blood carried oxygen at a density that would have been toxic to a Threnn, the iron in it binding the corrosive gas of her world and carrying it deliberately into every tissue, feeding the furnace. Her cells, put under stress in the sample chamber, did not fail the way Threnn cells failed. They adapted, throwing up proteins the deep field had no reference for, repairing themselves in real time under the observation lens. When Isa, following protocol, exposed a sample to the cold that had failed to slow the patient, the sample's cells clenched, slowed, and then, this was the part Vole read 4 times, began to produce their own heat, chemically burning stored fuel to hold their temperature against the field, exactly as the whole body had done on the cradle. It was not a system the conquered had ever needed to build. It was a system for a world that tried to freeze you, and that you refused to let freeze you. "They're not fragile," Isa said, staring into the deep field. She said it the way a person says a thing they have believed their whole life and just watched come apart. "Reconstructor, our whole medicine, everything we know, it's built on the idea that a body is fragile, that it wants to die and you have to talk it out of it. And hers doesn't want to die. Hers is." Arguing, Vole said, "Yes. I noticed that too." By the end of the rotation, the forelimb had a functional second joint, and Mara Quinlan had regrown enough of the crushed muscle to make a weak fist, and the Pathology Guild had sent down 2 more specialists, and the keeper of the difficult record had requested a private channel to the ring that Toon had granted, and that Vole had not been invited to. And a small, hard knot of dread had begun to form in Vole's thorax that had nothing to do with the human's biology, and everything to do with the word keeper and the word record, and the particular way the elders had said, "Do not let her leave." He did not sleep that rotation. Threnn did not sleep the way humans did. They settled, cooling into a long, slow quiet, but Vole did not even settle. He sat in the observation gallery with the field glass, and he watched Mara Quinlan the way the Prime had told him to. Not the instruments, the human, and near the deepest part of the ring's night, he watched her wake from her own settling, quiet and sudden, and lie still in the dark for a while. And then he watched her do a thing that he did not report to anyone, and turned over in his mind for a long time afterward. She checked her arm. In the dark, thinking no one was watching, the mild flat calm gone off her face for the first time since the lock, Mara Quinlan lifted her regrowing forelimb into the thin light from the cradle display and looked at it, at the new red tissue, the reaching bridge across the second joint, and Vole saw, on the small gray-pale human face, a flicker of something raw and frightened and human, the face of a person confronting a thing about her own body that even she did not fully understand and had learned, somewhere on some hard world, not to show. Then she put the arm down and put the comm back on, the way a mender puts on gloves, and settled again into the dark. "She's afraid too," Vole wrote in the record in the private log the guild would not read. "Not of us, of what she is. She has simply had longer than we have to get used to it." He looked at the words for a while. Then he deleted the last sentence, because he did not yet know if it was true, and a mender did not write down things he did not know. He kept the first 2. She talked to him, on the first rotation's deep night, while the ring settled around them and the guild slept, and only the 2 of them were awake in the deep ward. The mender who would not settle, and the human who woke from her own settling quiet and sudden the way her kind did. Vole had not meant to speak to her. He had meant only to watch, the way the Prime had told him to. But she caught him at the field glass, her dark eyes finding him in the low light, and she said, "You don't sleep either, huh?" And there did not seem to be any way to not answer that, so he came and sat at the foot of her cradle, and for a while they were quiet together, the alien and the human, in the pale ache of the conquered light. "Tell me about the boats," Vole said finally, because he was a mender and a mender learned that a patient who talked healed better, and because he wanted, with a want he did not examine too closely, to understand the world that had built the thing on his cradle. "The salvage. Your people crawl into dead hulls that no other species will touch. Why? What is out there worth that?" "Scrap," Mara said. "Metal, old ships, dead stations, wrecks nobody logged. You'd be amazed what a folded hull's worth if you pull it apart careful. Reactor cores, hull alloy, the rare stuff in the guidance systems. Somebody's got to go in and get it, and going in's the dangerous part because a dead hull's not stable, the metal's stressed, the seals are gone, and it can fold on you with no warning like ours did." She said it flatly, the folded hull that had killed her crewmate and nearly killed her, the way she said everything. "Nobody else does it. The gentle world species, the ones like you build machines to do it remote safe, and the machines are slow and they miss things and they cost a fortune. We just go in, cheaper, faster. We lose people, sure, but we go in and we come out with the scrap and we do it again next week. It's a living." "It is a way to die," Vole said. "Everything's a way to die. Ours are just faster and better paid." She shifted on the cradle, easing the splinted forelimb. "That's the part your people don't get about mine, I think. You look at us going into the dead hulls and you think we don't understand the risk. We understand it fine. We understand it better than you do. We've buried more crewmates than your whole gentle world's lost in a generation. We just decided the risk is the price, and we paid it and we kept going because the alternative is not going, and not going means somebody else's kids don't eat." She looked at him. "Your world was kind to you. You said the classification, Ashen 9, the hardest world in the volume. You know what that means from the outside. Let me tell you what it means from the inside. It means every single one of my ancestors all the way back was somebody who should have died and didn't. The storm should have got them. The cold should have got them. The thing with teeth should have got them, and the plague, and the falling rock, and the folded hull. And every single time, the one who lived was the one whose body closed the wound a little faster, ran a little hotter, got up one more time than the world knocked it down. That's 4 billion years of that. 4 billion years of the world trying to kill us, and only ever managing to make the survivors harder to kill." She flexed the regrown hand, and Vole heard the small, dry click of the new joint. "You don't get a body like this from a kind world, Mender. You get it from a world that spent 4 billion years failing to finish the job." Vole sat with that for a while. On the rings displays the numbers of her, the too high heat, the fast, strong pump, the healing that the machine still wanted to call death, scrolled on, patient, wrong. "And yet you are not cruel," he said. "I had expected, the guild expected, a body built by such a world to be a hard thing, a weapon. And you asked after your crewmate before you asked where you were. You are calming my apprentice. You held out your arm for our samples. A world that spent 4 billion years trying to kill. You did not make you cruel." Mara Quinlan was quiet for a moment, and when she answered, the flat calm had something old under it, something Vole would think about long after she was gone. "That's the part everybody gets backwards," she said. "You'd think a hard world makes hard people, and it does, but not the way you mean. A world that's trying to kill you all the time, you know what that teaches you, faster than anything. It teaches you that the only thing that gets you through is the person next to you. Dane in the front seat checking my line. The crew that pulls you out of a folded hull. Nobody survives Ashen 9 alone. Nobody ever did. The ones who tried to go it alone, the hard ones, the cruel ones, the world got them, same as everything else, because a person alone is a person the storm can finish. So the ones who lived, the ones I come from, they weren't the hardest. They were the ones who held on to each other hardest. That's what the world selected for in the end. Not cruelty. The opposite." She lay back, closed her eyes. "We heal fast because the world was trying to kill us. We're kind because the only way anybody survived it was together. Both things are true. Your keeper only believes the first one. That's his whole problem. He thinks a thing that's hard to kill has to be a monster. He never met a hull crew. He never watched an old man check somebody else's line first. She settled, the slow, deep rhythm coming down over her. You should sleep, mender, or settle. Whatever you do, I'm going to be here in the morning, healing up and scaring your machines. Nothing's going to happen tonight that hasn't already happened. Vole did not settle, but he sat at the foot of her cradle a long time in the pale light, listening to the wet catch of her breathing grow, a little less wet with every pull, and he understood that the survey the guild had commissioned would measure the wrong thing. It would measure the bone and the blood and the heat and the healing, all the ways her body could not be stopped, and it would file them under threat, and it would miss entirely the thing she had just told him plainly in the deep of the night, which was that the reason the hardest world in the volume had not produced a monster was that the hardest world in the volume had never once let anyone survive it alone. He wrote that down too, in the private log. And this time he did not delete it, because she had told him plainly, and a thing told plainly by the patient was, he had begun to understand, the truest instrument in the room. By the second rotation, the forelimb had bone in it. Vole found it when he ran the morning imaging, a routine he had started himself, because the instruments needed a baseline they could trust, and he no longer trusted anything he had not watched build. The limb that had come in crushed, that they had pinned for later removal, now had a shaft of new bone reaching up from the second joint toward the first, laid down along the axis where the old bone had been shattered out. And when Vole put the new bone under the deep field and measured it against the intact bone in Mara Quinlan's other forelimb, he found that the new bone was denser. Not slightly, measurably. The lattice of it was tighter, the mineral packed harder, the whole structure built to a tolerance the old bone had not met. That's wrong, Esau said when he showed her. That's reconstructor, a regrown bone should be weaker, that's the law. When we lose bone, we replace it with scar mineral, and the scar is always weaker, always. That's why a mended fracture is a mender's shame, because the body can never build it back the way it was. Hers isn't weaker. Hers is better, Vole said, than the original. She broke it, and her body rebuilt it stronger than it was before it broke. He said it flatly, the way the Prime had taught him to state a finding, and he watched the words land on the young apprentice's face and do the thing that this whole case kept doing to everyone it touched, the slow collapse of a certainty so foundational that the person had never once thought to name it, because that was the law, not just Threnn law. As far as the conquered knew, it was a law of bodies, universal, unquestioned. What breaks heals back weaker. You get one body, and every wound spends a little of it, and a life is the slow accounting of that spending, and the art of medicine is to spend it slowly. The whole gentle philosophy of the still-hand order was built on that arithmetic. Heal slowly, because healing is loss and loss is permanent, and the best a mender can do is make the loss as small as the wound allows. And on the cradle was a body that healed at a profit. She injured it worse than any of us have ever survived, Vole said, and her body treated the injury as information. It looked at the thing that broke her, and it built the next version to not break the same way. Do you understand what that means, Esau? Not the bone, the principle. Her body assumes it will be hurt again. It assumes the world is coming back for it. So it does not merely repair, it upgrades, against a future it takes for granted will be worse than the past. That's a horrible way to live, Esau said quietly. It is a world where slow healing gets you eaten, Vole said. You do not build a body like that on a gentle world. You build it on Ashen 9. He told the guild. The guild did not, at first, believe him, and then Sethric All confirmed the density measurement independently, and the guild went very quiet, and the private channel between the keeper of the difficult record and the Prime opened again, longer this time, and when it closed Toon came to find Vole in the deep ward with an expression on her broad, flat face that he had not seen on her before and did not like. They want to induce a controlled injury, she said. Vole set down the sample he was holding. They want to what? The Keeper's Guild, and 2 of the pathology elders. They have proposed formally, it is in the record now, that the ring perform a controlled, survivable injury to the patient under observation, in order to document the upgrade response in real time. A clean fracture. Something we can watch her rebuild from the first hour, with full imaging, so the guild can learn how the body decides what to strengthen and by how much. Toon's voice was flat, but her fourth limb had folded tight against her thorax, the tell she showed when she was holding something down. They are calling it the single most valuable medical observation available to the conquered in 400 years. They are not wrong about that, and they want my ring to break a healthy patient's bone to get it. The deep ward was very quiet. On the cradle, a few paces away, Mara Quinlan was asleep, settled, the slow, deep human rhythm, the regrown forelimb resting across her chest. And Vole looked at her, at the small, warm body that had crawled into a dead hull for a salary, and let a species that had twice called her a corpse take her blood without complaint, and he felt something move in his thorax that a mender was not supposed to feel about a patient. "No," he said. "Reconstructor. No, Prime. She came to us gutted. She has cooperated with every reading, every sample, every indignity, and she has done it while calming down my apprentice and asking after a dead crewmate, and eating paste that no other body in the volume can keep down. The creed does not permit us to refuse a body that still moves. It also does not permit us to harm one. You taught me that. You taught me the whole order, and I am telling you that if the Keeper's Guild wants to break her arm to watch it grow back, they can come to this ring and do it themselves, and they can do it while she is awake, and they can look at her face while they do it, because I will not." He had never spoken to the Prime that way. He waited for the rebuke. It did not come. Instead, Achai's Toon let out a long, slow breath through her thorax vents, and her fourth limb eased just slightly off her thorax, and she said, in a voice Vole had never heard her use, "Good. I was hoping you would say that, because I have already refused them, and now the record shows that both the ring's Prime and its reconstructor refused, and that will matter later, when the Keeper's Guild explains to the elders why the observation did not happen." She looked down at the sleeping human. "But understand what I have done, Vole. I have made an enemy of the Keeper of the Difficult Record, and the Keeper of the Difficult Record does not lose. He has waited 400 years for a case like this. He is not going to let a ring Prime and a reconstructor keep it from him because we developed a conscience about the specimen." She turned. "Watch her closer, and find out how fast she is actually healing, not the arm, all of it. Because the moment she is well enough to walk, the Keeper is going to argue that she stays for study, and the only thing that gets her home is if we can prove she is finished before he can convene a hold order. It is going to be a race, reconstructor. I would like to win it." The race, it turned out, was not close, because Mara Quinlan was healing faster than anyone could file paperwork. Vole documented all of it, because the Prime had asked him to, and because some cold, careful part of him understood that he was watching the single most important thing that would ever happen in his career, and that the record had to be perfect. He documented the flank, which sealed to a thin pale seam by the second rotation, and was, by the third, indistinguishable from unbroken skin except under the deep field, where the new tissue showed the same profit margin density he had found in the bone. He documented the bellows, the crushed breathing organs, which reinflated and reknit, and then, to the xenobiologist Kresch's open dismay on the relay, kept improving past the point of repair, the alveolar surface reorganizing, the oxygen transfer efficiency climbing above what the intake imaging had recorded before the injury. "She breathes better now than before the wreck," Kresch said, and there was something close to grief in the old elder's voice. "Do you understand, reconstructor? We nearly killed her. The hull nearly killed her. And her body took the near death and used it. She will walk out of your ring, if she walks out of your ring, with better lungs than she walked in with. The injury made her more suited to survive the next injury. That is not medicine. That is not even biology as I have understood it for a lifetime. That is a weapon that got a good look at what nearly killed it. Vole documented the immune event too, and that one frightened even him. It happened on the third rotation. A contaminant got into the deep ward, a small thing, an airborne agent, one of the drift spores that lived in the recycled atmosphere of every way station, and that the Concord's medicine had been fighting quietly for centuries. To a Threnn, a heavy exposure was a serious matter, a slow wasting infection that took a season of stasis care to clear. Mara Quinlan, mid-healing, her body already burning fuel at a rate that should have left her defenseless, took an exposure that the deep ward sensors flagged as significant, and the guild braced for the human to sicken, because a body that spent everything on regrowing a limb should have had nothing left to fight an infection. She did not sicken. Vole watched it in the samples in real time, and he called Issa over to watch it with him because he did not want to be the only one who had seen it. The drift spore entered the human's tissue, and the human's tissue noticed, faster than Threnn tissue noticed, orders of magnitude faster, and it did not merely wall the spore off the way a Threnn body would have. It took the spore apart. It manufactured in a matter of hours a specific counter to a contaminant it had never encountered before, deployed it, cleared the exposure, and then Vole made Issa read this part off the deep field herself, because he did not trust his own reading. It kept the template. It filed the counter away, built into the tissue ready, so that a second exposure to the same spore would be met not in hours but in moments. It learns, Issa said. She had stopped being frightened somewhere in the last rotation and had become something else, something Vole recognized because he felt it too. A scientist standing at the edge of a thing so far past her training that fear had burned off and left only a terrible clean attention. Reconstructor. Her body doesn't just fight. It remembers the fight. It keeps a record of everything that ever tried to kill it, and it gets better at killing the thing back. Our medicine, we have nothing like this. We clear an infection and the body forgets it and can catch it again next season. Hers files it. Hers builds an archive. Out of every disease it survives. On a world, Vole said slowly, with disease that would empty this ring in a rotation. Yes, you would need that. You would need a body that only has to survive a thing once. He looked at Mara Quinlan, who had, through the entire immune event, felt nothing worse than a mild flat tiredness that she had described to Issa as coming down with something and then not, and who was now sitting up on the cradle working her regrown fingers through their range of motion with the dogged patience of a person doing physical therapy she had clearly done before, and Vole understood that he was not looking at a medical miracle. He was looking at a citizen of Ashen 9 doing an entirely ordinary thing, which was recovering, and that the reason it looked like a miracle was that the Concord had never once stood in a room with a body that had been built by the hardest world in the surveyed volume. Reconstructor Vole. The voice came over the relay, and it was not the primes and it was not Creshes, and it took Vole a moment to place it because he had only heard it once. The keeper of the difficult record. I have been reviewing your documentation. It is excellent work, thorough, careful. It will be studied for a very long time. A pause, and Vole felt the hair-fine cilia along his spine lift, because he had learned by now that when the keeper paused, it was because the difficult part was coming. You have documented, I think, more than you realize. You have documented a body that improves without limit under stress. That learns every disease. That rebuilds itself stronger than baseline from any survivable injury. And you have documented, Reconstructor, that we cannot stop it. That deep cold fails. That we have no drug, no field, no procedure that slows it. Do you understand what that means for the Concord, for the volume? It means we have a great deal to learn, Vole said carefully. It means, said the keeper of the difficult record, that there is a species out there, on the worst world we have ever catalogued, that our entire medicine cannot kill even when it is trying to save them. And that species crews the salvage boats and works the transfer lanes and files through our way stations by the thousand. And not one of us, not one, in 400 years, ever thought to ask what it would mean if we ever had to face them as anything other than patients. Your Mara Quinlan is not a medical case, reconstructor. She is a survey. And the survey has come back with a number that frightens me. So I am going to ask you a question, and I would like you to think before you answer it, because your answer is going into the difficult record under your name. The pause again. How do you kill one? If you had to, if it came to that. You have watched her body defeat cold, injury, and disease in the space of 3 rotations. Tell me, reconstructor Vole, mender of the Stillhand Order, how would you kill this human, if the volume ever needed it done? The deep ward had gone very still. Esau was staring at the relay. On the cradle, Mara Quinlan had stopped working her fingers, and Vole realized with a cold drop in his thorax that the relay had been on the open channel, that the translator patch on his collar had rendered the keeper's question into flat human speech a half-beat behind, and that the patient had heard every word of it. He turned to look at her. Mara Quinlan looked back at him. The mild, flat calm was still there. But underneath it, in the dark, quick eyes, was the thing he had seen once in the deep of the ring's night, when she had thought no one was watching. The thing that was not fear exactly, but that knew all about fear, that had grown up next to it and made a working peace with it. "You don't," she said. She said it to Vole, not to the relay, in a voice so quiet the patch almost missed it. And then she went back to working her fingers, one at a time, through their slow returning range, as if she had not just answered the oldest and most powerful mender in the Concord's medicine, as if the question had been about the weather. "You don't kill one," Mara Quinlan said. "That's the whole thing, that's what your survey found out. Everybody figures it out eventually, the storms, the ice, the things with teeth, the diseases you people are so scared of. They all had a good long run at us. And here we are." She flexed the regrown hand, made a fist with it, a real one now, and looked at it with that flicker of raw wonder she thought she was hiding. "We're the ones that don't stop." "That's not a threat. I'm not threatening anybody. It's just the answer to your question, and you asked it on an open channel, so—" She laid the hand down. "You don't." The relay was silent for a long moment. Then the keeper of the difficult record said, very softly, "Thank you, Mara Quinlan," and closed the channel. And Vole stood in the deep ward with his apprentice and his patient, and understood that the case had just stopped being about medicine and become about something much older and much colder, and that he was standing directly in the middle of it. Before the keeper filed his hold, the guild tried one last time to stop her healing, not to harm her, they told themselves, but to understand it, which in the end amounted to the same thing. It was the pathology elders who pushed for it, and Sethric All who carried it out, and he did it reluctantly, over Vole's objection, because the guild had voted, and a pathologist of his standing did not refuse a guild vote. The proposal was clinical and reasonable in the way all of the keeper's works were reasonable. If the ring could not slow the proliferation with cold, perhaps it could slow it chemically, with the suppressants the Concord used on the rare early spreadings that were caught before they became fatal. The drugs that bought a mender a few extra rotations, with a dying patient, by throttling the body's ability to divide its own cells. If the drug slowed Mara Quinlan's healing, it would prove her regeneration ran on the same machinery as the spreading, only controlled. If they did not slow it, the guild would learn something else. Either way, the elders wanted the observation, and so Sethric All came down to the deep ward with a dose calibrated for a body Mara's size, and the reluctance heavy on his old pale plates. "They want to give me what?" Mara said, when Vole told her, because Vole had decided by then that he would not do a single thing to her body without telling her first, guild vote or no guild vote. "A suppressant, it slows the division of cells. We use it on the spreading on our malignancies to buy time. The guild wishes to see whether it slows your healing. It is not dangerous to you at this dose. Sethric All would not administer it if it were, but I will not pretend it is for your benefit. It is for theirs. You may refuse." I will record the refusal, and it will hold." Mara Quinlan considered it, working her regrown fingers through their range, and Vole watched her do the thing she always did with a decision: turn it over, look for the seam, weigh it flat and cold, and without any of the fear the choice would have put into anyone else. "Will it tell them anything true?" she asked. "Yes, whether it works or not, it tells them something true about how you heal." "Then give it to me." She said it the way she said everything, mildly, as if agreeing to a second helping of paste. "I've let them freeze me and sample me and argue over whether I'm a person. Might as well let them poison me a little and find out I'm boring. If it gets them off the idea that I'm the spreading, it's worth a bad afternoon." She held out her arm, the intact one, to Sethric All, and the old pathologist hesitated, and Mara looked at him with those dark, quick eyes and said, "It's all right. You already looked under the splint on the first day. You've been decent about this the whole time for a man taking pieces of me. Give me the dose. Let's find out." Sethric All gave her the dose. They watched her for a full rotation. The suppressant went into her the way it went into a Threnn, and the deep field tracked it spreading through her tissue, binding where it bound, throttling the machinery of division exactly as it was built to do, and for a span of perhaps an eighth of a rotation, it worked. The regrowth in her forelimb slowed. The deep field showed the dividing cells hesitate, the profit margin healing stall, and Sethric All made a low sound of grim satisfaction and said, "There. It is the same machinery, controlled but the same. The elders will want." And then Mara Quinlan's body noticed the drug. Vole saw it happen in the deep field, and he called Sethric All and Issa both to watch, because he did not want to be the only witness to a thing the guild would not believe. The human's tissue, throttled, stalled, examined the thing that was throttling it, the same way it had examined the drift spore, the same way it examined cold and injury and everything else the universe put into it, and it built a counter. Not slowly. In the space of that same eighth of a rotation, her body identified the suppressant, manufactured an enzyme to break it down, cleared it from the throttled tissue first and then the whole body, and resumed healing. And it did not merely resume at the old rate. It resumed faster, as if the interruption itself had been information, as if the body had filed chemical interference alongside cold and injury and disease in its endless archive of things that had tried to stop it and failed. By the end of the rotation, the suppressant was gone from her entirely, metabolized, and the regrowth had not only recovered the ground it lost but overtaken the projection. And Sethric All stood at the deep field with his old pale plates gone still and said, very quietly, "It filed the drug. It treated our medicine as a disease and it cured itself of it." He turned to Vole. "Reconstruct her. We cannot slow her. Not with cold. Not with chemistry. There is nothing in the Concord's pharmacopoeia that her body will not disassemble faster than we can dose it, because everything we have is built to work on a body that cannot fight back, and hers fights back against the medicine. Do you understand what I am telling the guild? We do not have a tool that works on her. If a human ever came to a Concord ring that we needed to stop, not save, stop, we could not do it. Our entire art is built on the assumption that the body is on our side, weak and grateful. Hers is on its own side, and its own side is winning." "She agreed to the dose," Vole said. "She held out her arm. She has fought back against nothing but the drug, Sethric All. Not us, the drug." "I know." The old pathologist looked at Mara Quinlan, who had felt the whole event as a few hours of mild flat wrongness she had described to Issa as my arm going to sleep and then waking up cranky, and who was now, unbothered, eating paste again. "That is what unsettles me most, Reconstructor. Not that we cannot stop her. That we have spent 3 rotations testing every way we know to stop her, and she has let us, patiently, out of a kind of courtesy. And the whole time her body has been quietly proving that the courtesy is the only reason any of it worked. She has never once stopped cooperating. And I find that I would be less frightened if she had." Mara Quinlan looked up from the paste, having caught the shape of it if not the words, and gave the small mouth movement the patch called a smile. "You're doing the thing again," she said to Sethric All. "The thing where you're scared of me because I didn't do anything. I keep watching you people do that. You freeze me, I let you. You cut me, I let you. You poison me, I hold out my arm. And every time I cooperate it scares you worse, because you keep waiting for the part where I turn out to be the monster the machine said I was, and it keeps not coming, and you don't know what to do with a scary thing that just lies here and heals and thanks you for the paste." She set the paste down. "Here's a thing my crew chief used to say. The most dangerous person in any room is the one who's got every reason to be angry and isn't, not because they're about to snap, the opposite, because they've already decided you're not worth it and they're just waiting to see if you'll make it worth it." She lay back on the cradle. "I'm not going to make it worth it. None of you have. Even the old one on the relay, the one who wants to keep me, he's not worth it either. He's just scared. Scared people do stupid things, and then somebody has to be the grown-up about it. Out here, more often than not, that's us. You'd be surprised how often the Deathworlders are the grown-ups in the room." She closed her eyes and settled. Sethric All stood over her a while longer, and then he gathered his samples and his instruments, and he went to tell the guild that there was no drug, no field, no procedure in 400 years of conquered medicine that could slow a human who did not wish to be slowed, and that the only reason the ring had learned anything at all was that the human in question had chosen, out of a courtesy the guild had done nothing to earn, to let them try. Vol watched him go, and he wrote the finding down in the record, and he understood that the guild would read it and hear only the first half. "We cannot stop her," and would take from it exactly the wrong lesson, the keeper's lesson, the lesson that a thing you cannot stop is a thing you must cage before it learns it cannot be stopped. They would miss the second half, the half that mattered, the half where a gutted salvage-tech held out her arm for a poison because it might get a room full of frightened aliens to stop being frightened of her, and then filed the poison away with everything else her hard world had taught her to survive, and asked for more paste, and waited patiently to see if any of them would finally make it worth her while. None of them ever did. That was the finding Vol wished the guild would read. It never quite did, not until the venting hold, not until an apprentice was dying and the human broke the only cage they had to go save her, and even then some of them only heard she broke the cage and reached again for the wrong lesson. But Vol heard it. He heard all of it from the first rotation. And he wrote it down, the whole finding, both halves, in a record he was no longer certain anyone but he would ever read correctly, and he kept turning off the alarm every rotation and watching the patient instead of the machine. The hold order came through on the fourth rotation, and it had the keeper of the difficult record's mark on it, and it was worded with 400 years of practice at getting exactly what one wanted while appearing to want only what was reasonable. Toon read it aloud to Vol in the scrub chamber, her voice flat, her fourth limb folded so tight against her thorax that the plates had gone pale at the join. By authority of the difficult record and the standing interest of the conquered in matters of species survival, the patient designated Mara Quinlan, Registry Ashen 9, is placed under medical hold aboard the conquered trauma ring at Way Station Hesper Vol, pending full biological survey. The patient may not be discharged, transferred, or released to any external authority, human or otherwise, until the survey is complete. Estimated duration of survey, indefinite. She lowered the reader. Indefinite. He has written a cage and called it a hold. He cannot break her arm, so he is going to keep her until she dies of age, taking samples the whole time, and he has framed it as protecting the volume, so that any elder who objects is objecting to the safety of every world in the conquered. She'll leave, Vol said. You said it yourself, as if we could stop her. That is exactly what he is counting on. Toon set the reader down. Think, reconstructor. He does not need the hold to physically contain her. He knows as well as we do that there is no cell in this ring she could not walk out of if she decided to. He needs the hold to make her leaving a crime. If she is under a lawful medical hold and she walks out, then she is no longer a patient who recovered. She is a Verge-class specimen that broke containment. And a Verge-class specimen that breaks containment is a threat to the volume, and a threat to the volume can be pursued, detained, and if the difficult record decides it, studied by other means on other worlds under other rules, and no creed protects her anymore. He is not building a cage to hold her, Vol. He is building a reason to hunt her. The hold is the trap. The moment she walks out of it, he wins, because then he gets to decide what she is. Vol was quiet for a long moment. Then she has to leave as a patient, he said slowly, discharged, lawfully, before the hold takes full effect. The hold took full effect when he filed it. No. Vol brought up the order on his own reader, read it again, felt the cold, careful part of his mind, the mender's part, the part that read failure in the way numbers leaned, find the seam. It took provisional effect. Read it again. Pending full biological survey. The survey is the instrument of the hold, and the survey has an author of record prime. It is this ring. It is my documentation. He built his hold on top of my survey, and he did it because my survey is the most thorough in the conquered, but that means the survey answers to me, and a survey is complete when the surveyor of record declares it complete. He looked up. If I close the survey, if I file that the biological survey of the patient Mara Quinlan is finished, findings recorded, nothing further to observe, then the hold has nothing left to pend on. It becomes a hold with no purpose. And a hold with no purpose is one an elder can vacate in an eighth of a rotation. Elder Van could vacate it. Kresh would support it. Toon looked at him for a long, still moment, and something moved behind her ocular membranes that Vol had not seen there before, aimed at him. You would have to close the survey knowing it was not finished, she said. The most valuable observation in 400 years of conquered medicine, and you would sign your name to a document that says there is nothing further to learn. You understand what that does to your standing in the guild. You understand the keeper would spend the rest of your career making certain everyone knew what you did. She calmed down my apprentice, Vol said. Gutted, on a cradle, surrounded by a species that called her a corpse twice, and she calmed down Issa because Issa's hands were shaking. That is what I have to weigh against my standing in the guild prime. I find it does not weigh very much. Toon let out the long, slow breath through her thorax vents. Write it, she said. Write the closing survey. Make it perfect, make it so thorough that no elder can claim the observation was cut short, so complete that closing it looks like the natural end of the finest documentation the guild has ever seen, and not like what it is. Buy me a lawful discharge, reconstructor, and I will spend everything I have with the elders to make it stick before the keeper can convene a review. She paused at the chamber door. How long do you need? To document a body that changes every rotation in a way that looks final, Vol considered it. 2 rotations, maybe 3. You have less. The keeper knows how these things go. He will move to make the survey a guild instrument instead of a ring instrument, take it out of your hands, put his own surveyor on record. Once he does that, you cannot close it. He will file for that transfer the moment he suspects what you are doing. Toon's plates flexed. So do not let him suspect. Keep documenting. Look busy. Look like a reconstructor building the keeper's cage for him. And write the closing in the dark. Vol wrote in the dark, and while he wrote, Mara Quinlan got up off the cradle. It happened on the 5th rotation, and it happened the way everything with her happened, quietly, without drama, as an entirely ordinary thing that rewrote another of the Conquered's laws in passing. Vol came into the deep ward with the morning imaging, and found the cradle empty and his thorax seized. And then he found the human standing at the field glass on the far side of the ward, holding the rail with her regrown forelimb, looking out at the slow-turning bulk of the way station and the bright edge of the planet beyond it. And she turned when he came in and gave the small mouth movement the patch called a smile. Legs work, she said. Figured I'd try them. This gravity's a joke. By the way, you people keep it this light on purpose. I feel like I could jump straight through your ceiling. She shifted her weight, experimentally, and Vol watched her body do the thing that Kresh had warned the guild it might do and that he had half hoped it would not: adapt. The way station ran at a fraction of the gravity of Ashen 9, a gentle spin, comfortable for Threnn, barely there for a body built to fight the crush of a heavy world, and Mara Quinlan's muscles, freed from the load they had evolved to carry, were not wasting the way a Threnn's would in low load. They were reorganizing, recalibrating around the new environment, keeping the mass, keeping the power, so that a body already stronger than any Threnn had become, in 5 rotations of alien gravity, disproportionate to it in a way the deep field could measure. "You're getting stronger," Vol said. "I'm getting lighter," Mara corrected. "Same muscle, less to carry. Everybody's strong in low grav for a while. It fades." She tested her grip on the rail, and Vol saw the metal flex, the field glass rail, brushed conquered alloy rated to hold a settling Osharan laborer, and it flexed under a human hand that was not even gripping hard. Mara noticed it too and let go and gave the rail a rueful look. "Or maybe not. Sorry about your railing." She looked back out at the planet. "How long have I been here?" 5 rotations. And nobody's messaged Deepwater, my company. The Prime sent word to the human authorities on the 2nd rotation. There has been no reply. There wouldn't be. We were off the lanes doing a job nobody logs. Mara was quiet for a moment, and Vol saw the calm thin just at the edges, saw the thing underneath it that was not fear but was next to fear. "The pilot," she said. "Dane, the older guy in the front seat. Nobody ever answered me about him. Which means the answer's no, right? He didn't make it out of the hull." Vol had the intake record. There had been one body brought through the lock, and it had been hers. He had known since the 1st rotation and had not said it, because there had never been a moment when saying it would help, and because he was a mender and menders learned when a truth was medicine and when it was only a wound. "There was only one patient brought to the ring," he said. "You." Mara Quinlan nodded slowly, still looking out at the planet, and she did not weep. Vol did not know if humans wept. He had never asked, but her jaw set, and her regrown hand tightened on nothing, and after a while she said very quietly, "He had grandkids. 3 of them. He used to show me pictures on the long hauls, and I used to pretend I wasn't sick of the pictures, and now I'd give a lot to see one more of them." She breathed. "He was the one who taught me the boat. Taught me you don't go into a folded hull without a second line. And then the one time it mattered he was in the front seat where the second line couldn't reach, and I was in the back, and the metal came in, and..." She stopped. "Put the comm back on." Vol watched her do it, watched the human reach up and pull the flat, mild composure down over the raw thing like a mender pulling a field over a wound. And he understood that this, too, was a kind of healing, and that hers was as fast at this as it was at everything else, and that the speed of it was not because she felt it less, but because her world had never once given her the luxury of feeling it slowly. "You should sit," Vol said. "The healing costs you even now." "Everything costs," Mara said. "You just keep going." She let go of the rail and walked back toward the cradle, and her gait was steady, too steady, a body 5 rotations out from catastrophic trauma walking like it had somewhere to be, and she sat on the edge of the cradle and looked at Vol with those dark, quick eyes. "You're the one that turned off the alarm," she said. "First day. I remember it. Everybody else was reading the machines and you were the one reading me. So I'm going to tell you something, Mender, and I want you to actually hear it because I don't think the rest of them are going to." She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, the regrown arm and the old one, matched now nearly. "That old one on the relay, the keeper, he's not trying to help me get home." "No," Vol said, "he is not." "Yeah. I figured. I've met people like him. Every world's got them, the ones that look at something they can't beat and instead of leaving it alone they get curious." She said the word the way another person would say a slur. "He wants to keep me, study me, figure out what makes me tick so he can figure out how to make me stop ticking. And he's telling everybody it's for safety, right? For the good of all the nice, gentle worlds, because I'm dangerous." "He has filed a hold order," Vol admitted. Indefinite, framed as a survey. Course he has. Mara Quinlan's mouth moved, and it was not the smile this time. It was something older and flatter and very tired. You want to know the funny part? I'm not dangerous. I'm a salvage-tech. I pull scrap out of dead boats for a paycheck. I have never in my life wanted to hurt anybody, and I don't want to hurt any of you, and if that old man would just let me heal up and send a message and go home, he would never hear from me again as long as he lived. She looked down at her hands. But he's not going to do that, because the thing that scares him isn't anything I've done, it's what I am, and you can't talk a person out of being scared of what you are. I learned that a long time ago. She looked back up. So what's the plan, Mender? Because you've got one, I can tell. You've had the look of a man writing something in his head for 2 days. Vole was quiet for a moment, then he told her. All of it, the hold, the survey, the seam in the order, the closing document he was writing in the dark, the race against the keeper's move to take the survey out of the ring's hands. He was not supposed to tell a patient the machinery that decided her fate. He told her anyway, because she had asked him plainly, and because he had decided somewhere in the last 5 rotations that Mara Quinlan was owed the truth more than the guild was owed its procedures. She listened without interrupting, which he had learned by now was rare for her, and when he was done she nodded slowly. So you're going to write a piece of paper that says you're done studying me, she said. Before he can write a piece of paper that says he gets to study me forever. Yes. And if he wins the race, I'm a specimen, and if you win it, I go home. Yes. Mara Quinlan considered this. Then she did a thing that Vole did not expect. She laughed. It was a short human sound, low, with no real humor in it, and the patch did not try to translate it, and she shook her head and said, You people, you've got a body on your table that beats everything you've got, cold, injury, disease, all of it, and you're going to save my life with paperwork. She looked at him, and the dark eyes had something in them now that had not been there before, something Vole would think about for a long time afterward. That's the part your keeper doesn't get. He thinks the dangerous thing about us is that we don't die. It's not. Anybody cannot die if their body's built for it. The dangerous thing about us is that when we're cornered, we don't fight the way he expects, and we don't panic, and we don't die on schedule. We get quiet, and we start looking for the seam. Same as you're doing right now. She lay back on the cradle, folded her hands on her chest, closed her eyes. Write your paper, Mender. Write it good. And if he wins the race anyway, the calm was total now, flat and low and certain. Then we'll do it the other way, and he really won't like the other way, because the other way is I just leave, and there isn't a cell in this ring that can hold the arm you people rebuilt. She settled into the slow, deep human rhythm. Vole stood over her for a while, and then he went to write his paper, and he wrote it good. The keeper moved on the 6th rotation, and he moved faster than Threnn had feared. Vole was in the deep ward, 3/4 of the way through the closing survey, when the relay chimed with a guild instrument. Not a message, an instrument, a formal document with the weight of the pathology elders behind it, and he opened it and felt the cold drop in his thorax that he was coming to associate with the difficult record. The keeper had petitioned to transfer surveyor authority for the patient Mara Quinlan from the ring to a standing guild commission, on the grounds that the observations exceed the competence of a single trauma reconstructor and require the resources of the full pathology guild. It was reasonable. It was worded to be reasonable, and if it passed, Vole's authority to close the survey ended, and the hold became permanent in everything but name. He knows, Vole said when Threnn came at his signal. He knows what I am doing. He has to. Why else move to take the survey now, when the ring's documentation is the best in the volume? He is not transferring authority because I am incompetent. He is transferring it because I am about to use it. Then we go to the elders now, Threnn said. Before the transfer petition is heard, we ask Elder Van to convene, we present your survey as it stands, and we ask for a discharge on the record while you still have the authority to support it. Her plates flexed. It is not finished. You wanted 3 rotations. You have had part of one more. Is it enough? Vole looked at the survey. It was not finished the way he had wanted it finished. The immune archive was documented but not fully mapped, the strength recalibration measured but not modeled, a dozen threads left hanging where a lifetime of study should have gone. But it was thorough. It was, he thought, looking at it with the cold eye the Prime had trained into him, the most complete biological survey of a human being that had ever been assembled. And if he closed it now, no honest elder could say the observation had been cut short for lack of care. It's enough to be honest, he said. It is not enough to be complete, but nothing about her will ever be complete, Prime. That is the whole finding. She changes every rotation. A survey that waits for her to stop changing is a survey that waits until she dies. So the honest thing to write is that there is no final state to observe, that the observation is as complete as observation can be, and that everything further is not survey but study. And study of a patient who wishes to be discharged is not medicine. It is what the keeper wants to do, and the creed forbids it. He looked up. Convene the elders. I'll close it now. You'll close it in front of them, Toon said. Live, so there is no question of when. Come. They went up to the observation gallery, and Toon opened the emergency channel to the central ring, and to Vole's surprise it answered, Elder Van's image resolving in the air within moments, which told Vole that the old mender had been waiting, had known this was coming, had perhaps been waiting since the second rotation for the ring to make exactly this move. Kresh joined a moment later. And then, before Toon could speak, a fourth image resolved in the gallery air, and Vole's spine cilia lifted, because he had heard the voice but never seen the face, and the face of the keeper of the difficult record was old and narrow and perfectly, terribly calm. Prime Mender Achai's Toon, the keeper said. Reconstructor Vole, you convened an emergency channel to the elders. I took the liberty of joining since the matter concerns a petition I have filed. Let us not pretend. You are here to close the survey before my transfer is heard. I am here to prevent it. The elders are here to decide. Shall we be efficient? The gallery was silent. Down through the field glass in the deep ward, Mara Quinlan sat on the edge of her cradle with her hands folded, and Vole realized the deep ward channel was open again, that she could hear all of it, and that she had arranged herself to listen the way a person arranges to watch a storm come in over open water, still, attentive, unafraid, already thinking about the seam. Elder Van, Vole said, I am the surveyor of record for the patient Mara Quinlan. I have assembled the most complete biological survey of a human being in the Concord's history. I am prepared to close it, on the record now, with the finding that the patient's recovery is complete, that no medical purpose is served by continued observation, and that she should be lawfully discharged to return to her people. I ask the elders to accept the closing and vacate the hold. And I, said the keeper before Van could answer, ask the elders to reject the closing as premature and grant my transfer, so that the survey may continue under the guild's authority rather than being buried by a reconstructor who has, the narrow face turned, fractionally, toward Vole, grown fond of the specimen. It happens, elder. A mender spends 6 rotations with a patient and forgets that his duty is to the volume and not to the body on his cradle. I do not blame reconstructor Vole, but I do not trust his judgment, and neither should you. He turned off her death alarm on the first rotation. He refused the controlled injury observation. He has, at every step, chosen the comfort of one Verge-class specimen over the medical interest of every world in the Concord. And now he wishes to close the single most valuable survey we will ever conduct and send its subject home before we have learned the one thing that matters. The keeper's image leaned in. Elders, we are looking at a species our entire medicine cannot kill. That should frighten us. It frightens me, and a frightened Concord does not release the specimen. It keeps it and it learns, until the fear becomes knowledge. That is what the difficult record is for. May I speak, said Kresh. The xenobiologist's image was tired in a way Vole had not seen even on the first relay, and when Kresh spoke it was slow and heavy, and aimed not at the keeper but at the whole gallery, at the whole conquered, at 400 years of careful gentle medicine, standing at the edge of a thing it had never planned for. Keeper, you say the species frightens you because we cannot kill it. I want to correct you because the correction matters and because I have spent a lifetime on the Verge worlds and I am the only one here who has. We can kill them. Easily. A human dies to a great many things, to hard vacuum, to the wrong air, to a blade, to time. Mara Quinlan would have died in that hull if the courier had been an hour slower. They are not immortal. They are not invulnerable. What they are, the thing your instruments read as death, the thing that has frightened this ring for 6 rotations, is resilient beyond our imagination, because they were made by a world that spent 4 billion years trying to kill everything on it and only ever made the survivors tougher. That is not the same as unkillable, and the difference is the most important fact in this room. Kresh's image turned toward the keeper. Because you are proposing that we treat a resilient species as an enemy to be studied, and the record will show what you did not quite say, eventually to be countered. And I am telling you, as the only xenobiologist in the Conquered who has ever stood on a Verge world, that there is no faster way to make an enemy of the humans than to keep one of them in a cage in the name of learning how to kill her kind. They file everything that ever tries to kill them, Keeper. Reconstructor Vole documented it in her tissue, a body that remembers every disease and builds a permanent answer. Do you imagine the species does less? Do you imagine a people who evolved to survive everything their world threw at them will simply forget the 400 years the Conquered spent studying how to end them? We would be teaching the one species in the volume that never forgets a threat to regard us as one. Then what do you propose? Said the keeper softly. That we release her, learn nothing, and hope. Propose, said Kresh, that we treat her the way she has treated us. Do you know how she has spent 6 rotations as our captive keeper? She has calmed a frightened apprentice. She has submitted to every sample. She has asked repeatedly after a crewmate we could not save. She has flexed her regrown hand and apologized for bending a railing. She has been in every hour of her captivity more decent to us than we have been to her. That is the survey finding that matters, not that we cannot kill her. That we did not have to fear her in the first place, and we chose to anyway, and she has watched us choose it, and she has been patient with us while we did. Reconstructor Vole asks to close the survey and send her home. I second it. Not because the science is finished. It will never be finished, but because continuing it, the way you mean to continue it, would be the single most dangerous thing the Conquered has done in 400 years, and I would like the record to show that at least one xenobiologist saw it coming. The gallery was very quiet. Elder Van, Toon said, the ring stands with its reconstructor and with Kresh. Close the survey, vacate the hold, send her home. Elder Van had not spoken through any of it. The oldest mender in the Conquered had listened, ocular membrane still, and now the ancient image turned slowly, and looked not at the keeper and not at Toon and not at Vole, but down through the field glass, into the deep ward, at the small warm human sitting on the edge of her cradle with her hands folded, listening to a room full of aliens decide whether she was a patient or a specimen. Mara Quinlan, Elder Van said, you have heard all of this. The channel has been open. That was not an accident. I asked the Prime to leave it open because I have decided that I will not rule on the disposition of a thinking being who is not permitted to hear the argument. So I will ask you directly, and I will weigh your answer. The Keeper believes your kind is a danger that must be studied. My xenobiologist believes studying you is the danger. You are the only human any of us has ever spoken to. Tell me, plainly, if we open the lock and let you go, what will you do? Down in the deep ward, Mara Quinlan lifted her head and looked up through the field glass toward the gallery she could not see into, and spoke, and the patch rendered her flat, quiet human voice into the gallery a half beat behind her mouth. I'll go home, she said. I'll send a message to a woman named Sarah Dane and tell her that her father died in a folded hull doing a job he was good at, and that his crewmate made it because he taught her the second-line rule, and that he talked about his grandkids the whole way out. I'll go back to work, because scrap doesn't pull itself and I've got a mortgage on a bunk. And I will never think about the Concord again unless one of you makes me, unless one of you decides I'm too dangerous to leave alone and comes looking. She was quiet for a moment. That's the whole thing, Elder. That's all any of us ever wanted from anybody out here. Leave us alone and we'll leave you alone. We're not the ones who go looking. We're the ones who get found, usually by something that regrets it. Your keeper's scared of the wrong thing. He thinks the danger is that we don't die. The danger is what we do to the ones who won't stop poking us. And I am begging him from a cradle with a rebuilt arm to just let me go home, because I don't want to be the thing his record is about. I just want to see Dane's grandkids get his message. Her jaw set. Vote however you want. But if you keep me, understand that you kept me. That'll matter later. It always does. The gallery held its silence. And then, before Elder Van could speak, the keeper of the difficult record did a thing that Vole had not expected, and that changed everything. He closed his image from the Elder's channel and opened one to the way station. Station security to the Concord Trauma Ring, Deep Ward. The keeper's voice came through, flat and calm and final. By authority of the difficult record, the patient designated Mara Quinlan is a Verge-class specimen under indefinite hold. Prime Mender Toon's discharge is not yet ruled upon, and the hold remains in force. You will place the specimen in a containment field and hold her for guild transfer. Do so now, before the elders can vacate the order and before the specimen understands what is happening. Move quickly. She is faster than she looks. Vole was already running for the deep ward. The security came through the deep ward like a step behind Vole, and they were not Threnn. The way station contracted its security to the Grost, heavy, slab-shouldered, plated in the dull gray chitin of a high-gravity people, a full head taller than any Mender and 3 times the mass, and they came in the way the Grost came into everything, without hurry, certain of their weight. There were 4 of them. Between them they carried a portable containment emitter, a squat field generator that the Concord used to isolate contaminated patients, and Vole understood in a cold flash exactly what the keeper intended. Not a cell, not a cage, just a stasis containment field thrown around the human where she sat. A wall of held space she could not pass, lawful, clean, indefinite. Specimen, remain seated, said the lead Grost in the flat, contracted security cadence, and set the emitter down at the foot of Mara Quinlan's cradle. You are under hold. We are placing containment. Do not resist. Resistance will be documented. Mara Quinlan looked at the 4 Grost, and at the emitter, and at Vole standing in the lock with his plates gone pale, and she did not stand up, and she did not resist, and she did not stop being calm. She simply watched them power the emitter, watched the field bloom up around her cradle, a faint shimmer, a wall of stilled air, the same field that had held 1,000 contagious patients, and she sat inside it with her hands folded and her regrown arm resting across her lap. And when it was fully up, when she was sealed inside a barrier that the Concord had never in 400 years seen a live patient breach, she tilted her head and considered it the way she considered everything. As a problem with a seam in it somewhere. Reconstructor Vole, she said, and her flat, quiet voice came through the field muffled but clear. Is this the lawful part or the other part? The elders have not ruled, Vole said. The keeper moved before they could. This is not lawful, Mara. It is a hold with the ruling still pending. If you break it, you are a specimen that broke containment and he wins. If you wait. If I wait, 4 rocks in armor keep me in a box while an old man argues me into a research file. Mara Quinlan looked at the containment field. I've been patient, Mender. 6 days. I let them stick me, freeze me, sample me, argue about whether I'm a person over an open channel where I could hear every word. I've been more patient than any human I know would have been, because you turned off my alarm on the first day, and I decided you people might be worth the patience. But I'm not going in a file. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to sit here, and you're going to go finish your paper, and your elders are going to vote. And if they vote to let me go, this all ends nice and lawful, and nobody has to find out what this field is worth against an arm your own surgeons rebuilt to survive a folded hull. Her dark eyes came up. And if they don't, if that old man wins, then I stop being patient. Not angry, just done. You understand the difference. Vole understood the difference. He had seen it on her face in the deep of the night, not anger. The end of patience, which was a colder and more final thing. Give me 1/8 of a rotation, he said. The elders were about to rule when he moved. Kresh stands with us. Van was listening to you. 1/8. You've got until I get bored, Mara said, and folded her hands, and settled to wait inside the box. And that was when the ward went red. Vole felt it before he heard it, the deep ward pressure dropping, the wrongness of moving air, and then the alarm, the real one, the descending tone that meant a body was dying and the other one under it that no mender ever wanted to hear on a station, the hull tone, the breach tone. The relay in his collar spat station-wide traffic in a flood. Microbreach in the adjoining recovery hold, the long-term ward, the hold where the conquered kept its slow patience, the ones held in stasis for a season while their bodies did the glacial work of knitting. A spar of debris off the derelict lanes, the same lanes that had folded Mara Quinlan's hull, had struck the station's flank, and the recovery hold's outer plating had failed, and the hold was venting to the dark, and there were 9 patients in it in deep stasis, immobile, held in fields that needed power the breach was cutting, and one of them, the traffic said. One of the menders had gone in to try to seal the emergency bulkhead by hand, and the bulkhead mechanism had jammed, and now there was a mender in the venting hold too, pinned at the bulkhead, and the pressure was dropping too fast for a rescue rig to cycle through in time. The mender in the hold was Issa. Vole heard her designation come across the traffic, and his thorax seized. He was already moving. Every instinct a mender had turned toward the venting hold, but he was a corridor and a lock away, and the rescue rig needed to pressurize, and the math of it was the cold math the conquered knew too well, the math of a body and a clock and not enough time. And he knew, running, that Issa was going to die pinned at a jammed bulkhead because a piece of the same lanes that had nearly killed the human had come back for the ring. Behind him, in the deep ward, the containment field went dark. He did not see her do it. Afterward, when he pieced it together from the ward recordings for the difficult record, because there would be a record of this, he would make certain there was, he saw what the field glass saw. Mara Quinlan, inside a containment barrier that had held every contagion the conquered had ever isolated, stood up, put both hands against the field emitter's projection housing, and tore the housing open. Not the field she could not touch, the machine that made it. She reached through the barrier's own emitter port, the seam, the place the field could not cover because the field came out of it, and she took the generator apart with her hands, the regrown one and the old one, brushed alloy folding like foil, and the field collapsed, and she stepped out of the box, and she was not angry. The recording showed her face. She was calm. She was already moving toward the breach traffic on the ward display, reading it the way she read everything, looking for the seam. She caught Vole at the lock. Issa, she said. It was not a question, she had read the traffic. The young one, she's in the venting hold. Pinned at the bulkhead. The rig can't cycle in time. Then I go without the rig. Mara Quinlan was already at the lock's inner door, and the Grost were shouting behind them, and the keeper's voice was on the relay demanding the specimen be recontained, and none of it mattered, because the human had done the math faster than any of them, and the math said a rig cycle was time Issa did not have. How long can you people hold your breath? Not we do not, the vent, the pressure. Yeah, us neither for long, but longer than you'd think, and I heal. She looked at him, and for one moment the calm cracked, not into fear, into something fierce and clear and utterly human. That gravity's a joke, and that air's thin, and I can hold my breath long enough to pull a kid off a bulkhead. Open the inner door, Mender. I'll bring her back. And when I do, the calm came back down over it, flat and certain. You tell your keeper I was in a lawful containment field when I heard a Mender was dying, and I came out of it to go help. And if he still wants to put me in a file after that, he can explain to every world in the Conquered why the human broke containment to save a Threnn. Vol opened the inner door. He should not have. Every protocol forbade it. The venting hold was death, thin-aired and cold and dropping toward vacuum. He opened it anyway because Esau's hands had shaken in the scrub chamber and this human had steadied them, and because he had stopped, somewhere in the last 6 rotations, believing that the Conquered's protocols knew more than his own eyes. Mara Quinlan went into the venting hold, and Vol watched through the lock's small port, and what he saw he would carry for the rest of his life. She moved through the thin, freezing air of the hold the way she had said she would move, fast, low, unbothered by the cold that should have stopped her heart, unbothered by the air too thin to breathe, her body burning its furnace against the freeze exactly as it had burned against the deep field on the first rotation, everything the instruments had read as death now spending itself, on purpose, to buy minutes in a place built to take them. She reached the bulkhead. Esau was pinned where the jammed mechanism had caught her, a slab of the Conquered's own alloy folded across her lower body, and the young apprentice was still conscious, still trying, her dark plates gone gray with cold, and Mara Quinlan set her feet against the deck in the light false gravity and put both hands under the jammed slab and lifted. It did not lift for a Threnn, it did not lift for a Grost. It lifted for a body that a heavy world had spent 4 billion years building to lift things, freed into a gravity that was a joke, burning everything it had against the cold, and it lifted, and Esau came free, and Mara Quinlan pulled the apprentice up onto her shoulder and turned and came back through the venting hold toward the lock, unhurried, precise, spending her body like a currency she knew exactly how to spend. And Vol cycled the inner door, and the human came through into the deep ward and set Esau down and went to her knees beside her, and only then, with the apprentice safe and breathing, did Mara Quinlan let herself gasp, one long ragged human pull of good air, her gray-pale skin gone grayer, frost in the fine hair of her arms. Her regrown hand shaking now for the first time since the lock. "She's cold," Mara said, kneeling over the apprentice, her voice a rasp. "You people knit slow. She's going to need a season in a field, but she's alive and her spine's not crushed. I felt for it. Get a mender." She looked up at Vol, frost melting off her lashes. "Get a mender that isn't me." Vol got a mender. The ring's emergency response flooded the deep ward, and they took Esau into stasis, and the bulkhead sealed on the auto-cycle now that the jam was clear, and the breach was contained, and the 9 slow patients in the recovery hold survived because the emergency fields held on backup power long enough for the seal. And through all of it, Mara Quinlan knelt on the deep ward deck, getting her breath back and letting her body burn off the cold, and the Gross security stood in a loose, useless ring around her, no longer certain what they were guarding against, and the containment emitter lay in pieces where she had left it. On the relay, the keeper of the difficult record had gone silent. Vol crouched beside the human. Her breathing was steadying fast, then slow, the furnace banking down, and the color was coming back into her skin, and he could see, under the deep field sense a mender never turned off, her body already at work on the damage the cold had done, filing it, learning it, building the next version of her a little more ready for the freeze. "You had containment breached and a clear path to the lock," Vol said quietly. "You could have left. In the emergency, with the doors cycling, no one could have stopped you. You could have been on a transit skiff before the keeper finished his sentence. You went into a venting hold for an apprentice you have known for 4 rotations instead." Mara Quinlan looked at him, frost still melting off her, and gave the small tired mouth movement the patch called a smile. "Yeah," she said. "Well, she calmed down eventually. I liked her. She got a hand under herself, pushed up to sitting, waved off the mender who moved to help. And your keeper wanted a survey finding, right? Something for his difficult record. She looked up, past Vole, up toward the field glass and the silent relay and the old narrow face that had called her a specimen. There's his finding. Write it down, Mender. The human broke your best cage in about 4 seconds when a kid was dying, and then she used the freedom to go save the kid, and then she knelt on your floor and asked for a doctor that wasn't her, because she'd already done everything a body could do and she knew her limits. Her jaw set. We're not what he's afraid of. We never were. Put that in the record. The cold should have set her back. It did the opposite. Vole documented that too, because he had stopped being able to stop documenting her, because every time he thought he had found the edge of what her body would do, it moved the edge, and the venting hold was the clearest instance yet. She had gone into thin, freezing air that would have killed any conquered body in moments, spent her furnace against it for the time it took to lift a jammed bulkhead off an apprentice, and taken damage, real damage, frost injury to the tissue of her hands and face, the small hemorrhages a body suffers when it is pushed past the cold it was built for. On a Threnn, that damage would have meant a season of stasis care. On Mara Quinlan, it meant a rotation of the deep field showing her tissue do the thing it always did, only now against cold, noticing the injury, taking it apart, filing it, and building the repair one increment tougher than the tissue that had failed. By the end of the rotation after the breach, the human's hands tolerated cold that had burned them the day before. Her body had met the freeze once, survived it, and added it to the archive. The next freeze would find her readier. Everything found her readier. That was the whole finding, the one the survey kept arriving at from every direction. She was a body that treated the entire universe as a series of things that had not yet killed her, and improved against each one in turn, and the near death in the venting hold had not been a setback in that arithmetic. It had been a deposit. She is cold adapting, Kresh said on the relay, and the old xenobiologist sounded, for the first time in all of it, not frightened but something like awed. In real time. One exposure. Reconstructor, do you understand what you are looking at? On Ashen 9, the temperature swings in a single rotation, exceed anything a conquered body could survive. And her kind lived through it not by having one fixed tolerance, but by carrying the machinery to move the tolerance wherever the world demanded. She walked into your venting hold as a warm world body, and she is walking out of it a little more a cold world body. And if you put her on the ice, she would become an ice world body. And if you put her in the desert, she would become a desert body. Because that is what the humans are, not a body suited to a world, but a body suited to any world, tuned by whatever tries to kill it. We have spent 400 years believing that a species belongs to its world. Mara Quinlan does not belong to Ashen 9. Ashen 9 taught her to belong to anywhere. A long pause on the relay, and we put her in a containment field. Ancestors forgive us. We put that in a box and called it a specimen. The elders convened again on the second rotation after the breach, and this time the keeper of the difficult record did not join the channel uninvited, because the keeper of the difficult record was, Vole learned, the subject of an inquiry, not for the hold, which had been lawful in its wording, but for the order to breach a live containment on a patient during a station emergency. An order that the ring recordings showed had been given, while a mender was dying in a venting hold, and the keeper's entire attention had been on recaging the one being on the station capable of reaching her in time. It was Esau who ended him in the end, and she did it from a stasis field, half frozen, a rotation from being able to move, in a recorded statement the guild could not ignore. I was pinned, the apprentice's statement said, her voice slow and cold-thick on the recording but clear. I was going to die at that bulkhead. I knew it. The rig could not cycle in time, and I did the arithmetic the way we are trained to, and the arithmetic said I was already gone. And then the human came through the inner door. The human who was in a containment field the keeper ordered, the field she was not supposed to be able to leave. and she came into air that should have stopped her heart and cold that should have frozen her blood, and she lifted a slab of conquered alloy off my body that no mender could have lifted, and she carried me back, and she went to her knees and asked for a doctor that was not herself because she knew she had reached her own limit and would not risk mine on it. I am alive because a Verge-class specimen broke the keeper's cage. To save a Threnn she had no reason to save. I would like the difficult record to note that the most decent act I have witnessed in the ring this season was performed by the being the keeper wished to study to learn how to kill her kind. That is my statement. I am cold and I am tired and I stand by every word. Elder Van accepted the closing survey on the third rotation after the breach. The old mender did it plainly, without ceremony, in the observation gallery with Toon and Vole present, and the deep-ward channel opened so that Mara Quinlan could hear. "Reconstructor Vole," Van said, "you have submitted the closing of the biological survey of the patient Mara Quinlan, with the finding that her recovery is complete, that no medical purpose is served by continued observation, and that continued study would constitute not medicine but something the creed forbids. I have read your survey. It is the finest documentation in the Concord's history, and I expect it will be studied for as long as there is a Concord to study it. And I accept its closing. The survey is closed. The hold which pended upon the survey has nothing further to pend upon, and I vacate it. Mara Quinlan is discharged as a recovered patient, to be released to her people at her own request and by her own route. The difficult record will note that she was a patient, and that she recovered, and that she saved a mender's life while under an unlawful containment order, and that the Concord, for a period of 6 rotations, mistook the healthiest body it had ever treated for a dying one because our instruments had no setting for a thing that gets better faster than we knew a body could. The ancient mender paused. Correct your instruments, all of you, every ring in the Concord. Add the setting. Somewhere out there are more of them, and the next one may come to us dying for real, and I will not have a human bleed out on a Concord cradle, because the machine read her heart as too strong to be alive. Down in the deep ward, Mara Quinlan closed her eyes for a moment, and Vole watched the calm she wore crack one final time, not into fear and not into anger, but into something he had no word for, the simple exhaustion of a person who has been braced to fight for a long time and has just been told, unexpectedly, that she can stop. She let out a long, slow human breath. Then she put the calm back on, the way she always did, and looked up toward the gallery she could not see into. "Thank you, Elder," she said. "I mean that. I'll send the message and I'll go and you'll never hear from me." And for what it's worth, the flat, quiet voice steadied, "Your keeper wasn't wrong that we're dangerous. He was just wrong about when. We're not dangerous to the ones who leave us alone. We're dangerous to the ones who won't. He'd have found that out. You just made sure he doesn't have to." She was quiet a moment. "You people heal slow because your world was kind to you. That's not a weakness. That's a thing to be grateful for. Try to remember it's a thing to be grateful for, and not a thing to be scared of losing, and you'll be all right out here." The keeper of the difficult record came to see her before she left. Vole was there. He would not leave the human alone with the keeper, discharge or no discharge. And so he saw the old narrow mender come into the deep ward on the rotation of Mara Quinlan's discharge. Unarmed, uncontracted, no Grost behind him. Just the oldest and most powerful voice in the Concord's medicine come to stand at the foot of the cradle of the patient he had tried to keep. Mara Quinlan was up, and dressed in the plain gray recovery wrap the ring gave discharged patients, and her regrown arm was indistinguishable now from the other one except under the deep field, and she looked at the keeper with the flat, mild calm she had worn since the first rotation, and she did not stand and she did not sit. She simply waited, the way she waited for everything, looking for the seam. "I came to look at you," the keeper said. "Once, with my own oculars, not through an instrument. That is permitted, I think, even now." "It's permitted," Mara said. The keeper looked at her for a long time. Vole watched him do it, watched the ancient careful mind that had spent 400 years cataloging the difficult things of the volume try to file the small warm body in front of it and fail. And he understood that this, more than the vote, more than Esau's statement, was the keeper's defeat. Not that he had lost the hold, but that he was standing here at last in front of the thing he had feared, and finding it eating recovery paste and asking after a dead crewmate's grandchildren, finding it decent. Finding it tired, finding it wanting nothing from him but to be let alone. "You saved the apprentice," the keeper said. "You broke my containment to do it. Do you know what that cost me?" "Your inquiry," Mara said. "Your standing, maybe your record. Yeah, I know what it cost you." She tilted her head. "Here's the thing you still don't get, though, and I can see you not getting it, so let me say it plain because I'm leaving and I won't get another chance. I didn't break your cage to beat you. I didn't do it to make a point. I did it because a kid was dying one room over and I could reach her and you couldn't. That's all. There was no message in it. You're the one who turned it into a message, same as you turned my whole body into a threat, because that's what you do. You look at a thing and you ask how it could hurt you, and you never once ask what it actually wants." She stood then slowly, and she was a head shorter than the keeper, and a fraction of his mass, and Vole watched the old mender's plates go pale anyway, watched 400 years of authority take an involuntary step back from a salvage-tech in a gray wrap. "I'll tell you what I want, keeper. I want to go home. I want to send a message to a woman about her dead father. I want to pull scrap and pay my bunk and never think about your record again. That's the whole survey. That's the finding you spent all this fear to get. We heal stronger because our world made us, and we trade every bit of it for a world that didn't have to. Write that down." The keeper of the difficult record looked at her a moment longer. Then he did a thing Vole had not expected, and would not have believed if he had not seen it. He folded 3 limbs against his thorax, the deep old startle posture, the fear posture, the one Vole himself had shown over her cradle on the first rotation, and he held it deliberately in front of her, a thing a mender of his rank did not do in front of anyone, and it was not fear this time. It was the other thing the posture had always also meant, in the old tongue, before the conquered had gotten frightened enough to forget it. It meant I have seen a thing larger than my understanding, and I bow my spine to it, because that is what a wise body does when it meets the edge of what it knows. "We'll write that down," the keeper said. "Go home, Mara Quinlan. I will correct the record, and I will spend what is left of my standing making certain that when the next human comes to a conquered ring, they come as a patient and leave as one." He straightened slowly. "You were right about one thing more than the others. We heal slowly because our world was kind. I had come to think of that as our weakness. You have made me think of it as our luck. I am old enough that the difference matters to me." "Thank you for that. I did not want to learn it." "I am glad I did." He turned and left the deep ward, and Vole never saw him again. But the record changed. Every ring in the conquered got the new instrument setting within the season, the one for a body that runs too hot and heals too fast to be dead, and the notes that came with it were careful and humane and bore the mark of the difficult record. And Vole always believed, though he could never prove it, that the keeper had written them himself, at the end. The way a man writes down the thing he most did not want to know, so that no one after him has to learn it the hard way. The message to the dead pilot's daughter took Mara Quinlan a long time to record, and it was the only thing Vole ever saw defeat her. She asked for the relay on the rotation after the keeper left, and Toon granted it without question, and the ring gave her a private channel to route through the human relay buoys back toward the yards at Halden, where a woman named Sarah Dane did not yet know her father was dead. Vole offered to leave. Mara asked him to stay. He never understood entirely why, perhaps because he had turned off the alarm, perhaps because she had run out of her own people and a mender was the closest thing to a witness she had left. But she asked, and he stayed, and he stood at the edge of the deep ward while the human who had broken a containment field in 4 seconds sat in front of a relay pickup and tried 3 times to begin a sentence and could not. The body that healed from everything did not heal from this quickly, and Vole understood watching her, that this was the truth Kresh had been reaching for and had gotten slightly wrong. It was not that the humans felt their griefs less because their world had made them hard. It was that their world had never given them time to feel a grief slowly, and so they had learned to carry the whole weight of it at once in the moment, and set it down only later, in private in the dark, the way Mara Quinlan had checked her regrowing arm in the deep of the night when she thought no one was watching. The speed was not numbness. The speed was the cost. A body built to survive anything is a body that has had to keep moving through everything, and the grief does not go away because it heals fast. It only goes underground and waits and gets carried. She began, finally, on the fourth try, and she did it flat and steady, and Vole recognized the flatness now for what it was, not calm but control. The same control she had used on the cradle when the keeper asked how to kill her. "Sarah," she said, "it's Mara Quinlan from your dad's crew. I need to tell you something and there's no good way, so I'm just going to tell you. The Halden job went wrong. The hull we were pulling folded on us out past the lanes, no warning, old metal. Dane was in the front seat. I was in the back. He didn't make it out, Sarah. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. He went fast and he wasn't scared, and the last thing he did before it went was check my line, because that's who he was always checking somebody's line." She stopped, breathed, went on. "I made it because he taught me the second line rule, the one you probably heard him say 1,000 times at dinner, the one that used to make you roll your eyes. It's the reason I'm here to send this. He saved me with a rule he made up 20 years ago and never stopped saying. I want you to know that. I want the kids to know that. Their granddad died doing a hard job, right, and he took his crewmates' safety more seriously than his own, right up to the end. And there's a whole species of aliens out here that just spent a week learning what our people are made of, and your dad's the reason they learned the good version." Her jaw worked. "I got hurt bad. I'm all right now. Better than all right, long story, I'll tell you when I'm home. I'm coming home, Sarah. I'll come to Halden first before I do anything else, and I'll tell you all of it in person, and I'll bring what's left of his kit. He'd want the kids to have his tools. Tell them their granddad was the best hull man I ever crewed with, and the kindest, and that he talked about them every single haul until I could have drawn their faces. I'll see you soon. I'm sorry it's me telling you, I'm glad it's not nobody." She reached for the pickup, stopped. "He showed me the pictures every trip and I pretended I was sick of them. I wasn't. Tell them that too." She closed the channel. For a while she sat with her back to Vole, very still, and he did not go to her, because he did not know what a Threnn could offer a human in that moment, and he suspected the honest answer was nothing, and he had learned by now that Mara Quinlan did not want to be managed. So he waited, the way she had taught him to wait, and after a time she wiped her face with the back of her regrown hand and stood up and turned around, and the calm was back on, hard one, and she said, "Okay." And that was all, and Vole understood that the subject was closed and that pressing it would be a cruelty, and he let it be closed. "Your apprentice," Mara said. "Isa, she's out of stasis. This rotation, she is weak. She will need the rest of the season to knit, but she will knit." Vole paused. "She has asked to see you before you go. If you are willing." "Course I'm willing." They brought her to the long-term ward, where Isa lay in a recovery field, her dark plates gone patchy and pale from the cold, immobilized the way the Concord immobilized its slow-healing patients, held still for the season it would take her body to do the grudging work that Mara Quinlan's body did in a rotation. The apprentice's oculars found the human and cycled once, twice, and Vole saw her try to lift a limb toward the field glass and fail, too weak, and Mara Quinlan crossed the ward and put her hand flat against the field where Isa's hand would have reached, close as the barrier allowed. "Hey," Mara said, "there she is. You look terrible." Isa made the small, startled ripple of her plates that Vole had learned was her laugh, though it cost her, cold and weak as she was. "You came into the venting hold," she said, slow and thick. "For me. You were in a cage and you came into the venting hold." "Yeah, well, your hands were steady when you took my blood," Mara said. First day you weren't so sure, but you steadied up and you did the work, and that's the whole job, kid, being scared and doing the work anyway. You did the work. I wasn't going to leave somebody who does the work pinned to a bulkhead. She pressed her hand a little harder against the field. You're going to be knitting all season and you're going to hate it. It's going to be slow and boring, and you're going to feel weak and useless, and you're going to think about the bulkhead every time you close your oculars. That's normal. That's your body being kind to you, taking its time because it can, because your world let it learn to take its time. Don't you ever let anybody tell you slow healing's a weakness. You heal slow because your people never had to heal fast. That's a gift. You spend the season, and you come out the other side, and you keep steadying your hands and doing the work, and you'll be a hell of a mender. The flat mouth movement, the smile. Better than the ones who turned my alarm into a war anyway. I want to heal like you, Isa said, cold slow, and there was something young and raw in it. No, Mara said, and she said it gently, but she said it flat and certain, and Vol heard the whole weight of Ashen 9 in it. No, you don't. You want to heal like you. Slow and safe in a kind ward on a station over a gentle world, with people who'll hold you still and keep you warm for a season because they've got a season to spare. I heal like this because my world never gave me the season. It gave me the freeze and the crush and the thing with teeth, and it said close the wound now or die, and my whole species said fine, and here we are, and it's not something to want, Isa, it's something to survive. She took her hand off the field. You already got the better deal. Most people out here can't see it because it doesn't look impressive, but I've seen both. Believe me. You got the better deal. Isa's oculars cycled, slow, taking it in. And Vol saw the young apprentice understand something in that moment that it took most menders a lifetime to understand, if they understood it at all. That the fragile, grudging bodies the conquered spent 400 years apologizing for were not a failure of biology, but a mercy of circumstance. That gentleness was a thing their world had been able to afford them, and that the human standing over her recovery field, the one whose body could survive anything, had said with her whole flat, certain voice that she envied it. Thank you, Isa said, for the bulkhead and for that. Do the work, Mara said. That's how you thank me. Do the work and be kind to the scared ones. That's the whole thing. She stepped back from the field. All right, I've got a transit to catch and a long way to go and a woman waiting on me at Halden. Heal up, kid. They left Isa in the long-term ward, held still and warm and safe for her kind slow season, and Vol walked the human toward the lock. The ring had arranged her transit, a human freight runner that called at Hesperval on a long loop back toward the Halden yards, the captain willing to take a stranded salvage-tech aboard for the cost of her working the cargo, which Mara had accepted without hesitation, because of course she had, because she was a body that did not know how to stop being useful. She had the plain gray wrap and a small kit the ring had put together, and the dead pilot's tools, recovered from the courier's hold, in a bundle under her regrown arm. She looked, Vol thought, entirely ordinary. Small and gray-pale, and dirt would find her again within a rotation of being back on a boat, and no one who passed her in the transit hub would ever guess that she had spent 6 rotations rewriting the oldest certainties of the conquered's medicine simply by lying on a cradle and getting better. Reconstructor, she said at the inner lock. Vol, I never said it right, so I'm going to say it now once, and then we're both going to be uncomfortable about it, and that's fine. She turned to face him. You turned off my alarm on the first day. Everybody else in that room was reading a machine that said I was dead, and you were the only one reading me. You didn't know what I was. You had no reason to trust it. And you turned off the death alarm and you watched the patient instead of the instrument, and you kept doing it, every rotation, when it cost you your standing and made you an enemy of the scariest old man in your whole profession. You wrote a paper in the dark to get me home. You opened a lock you weren't allowed to open because a kid was dying and I could reach her. She held his gaze with those dark, quick eyes. That's not species. That's not death world or gentle world or any of it. That's just a good doctor. You'd have been a good doctor anywhere. I've met a lot of your kind of alien out here, and a lot of the Keeper's kind, and there's more of you than the Keeper wants anybody to believe. I wanted you to hear that from a human before I left. There's more of you than there are of him. That's the actual reason it's going to be all right between our peoples. Not because we heal fast, because there's more of you. Vole did not know how to answer that, so he told her the truth, which was the only thing he had ever found to give her that she seemed to want. On the first rotation, he said, when the instruments called you dead the second time, the Prime told me to call it, to record the hour of your death. It is a thing menders do. I have done it 11 times, and each of those hours is with me still, and I expected yours to be the 12th. And I did not call it, and I could not have told you why, except that the number on the temperature readout was too high, twice what a surviving body should carry, and the machine had flagged it as a corpse left too long under a lamp, and I looked at it and I thought, that is not a corpse cooling. That is something burning. A corpse does not burn. And I turned the alarm off, and I did not know I was turning off 400 years of my profession's certainty at the same time. I only knew that the reading in front of me did not match the death the machine insisted on, and a mender is taught before anything else, before the creed, before the whole gentle philosophy of the order. A mender is taught to trust the patient over the instrument always when the two disagree. He paused. We forgot that. As a profession, we built such good instruments that we stopped watching the patient. You reminded us. That is worth more to the conquered than the survey. I wanted you to hear that before you left. You did not only get yourself home, Mara Quinlan. You gave a whole order back the first thing it ever learned, and had let itself forget. The human looked at him for a long moment, and then she nodded slowly, and the flat mild calm had something warm under it now that Vole had not seen there before and would remember for the rest of his life. That's a good answer, Mender, she said. All right. One more thing and I'll go, because if I stand here any longer I'm going to get sentimental, and neither of us wants that. She shifted the dead pilot's tools under her arm. Take one more reading before I go. The whole body, deep field, everything. I know you want to. I've watched you not ask for a rotation, so ask. Consider it a gift. And then close it in your record and let it be the last line, because I think you should have the last line be the true one, not the one the machine wrote on the first day. Vole took the reading. He should not have needed to. The survey was closed, the hold vacated, the patient discharged. But she offered, and he was a mender, and there are gifts you do not refuse. So he ran the deep field over Mara Quinlan one last time in the antechamber of the lock, the whole body, every system, and he set the readings beside the intake imaging from the first rotation, the ruin beside the woman, and he read what 6 rotations had made of the thing that had come through the lock hanging by a cord, and he understood the survey's true final line, the one the machine had been trying and failing to say since the first alarm. The bone was denser than baseline, not only the regrown forelimb now, but the frame around every healed injury, the body reinforcing itself along every line the trauma had drawn, so that she would walk off the ring with a skeleton measurably stronger than the one she had walked on with. The lungs moved more air than the intake had recorded, reorganized by the near drowning of the crushed bellows into something more efficient than the originals. Her tissue carried the immune archive now, the filed and permanent answer to a drift spore she would never sicken from again, and beside it, newer, the beginning of a cold tolerance she had not possessed before the venting hold. Every place the world had broken her, her body had closed, and then kept going, past the seal, past the repair, past baseline, into a version of Mara Quinlan more suited to survive the next folded hull than the one who had crawled into the last one. The wounds had not merely healed. They had healed stronger, all of them, every one. And the woman who carried them stood in the lock antechamber in a plain gray wrap with a dead man's tools under her arm, entirely calm, entirely ordinary, a salvage-tech with a mortgage on a bunk and a message already sent, and a long way still to go. And she did not know or care that she was, by every instrument the conquered owned, the single most thoroughly documented refutation of 400 years of medicine ever to stand in one of its locks. She just wanted to catch her transit. "There it is," Mara said, watching his oculars move over the readings. "That's the true line." "That is the true line," Vole said. "Then write it down and let me go home." He wrote it down. Beside the machine's first entry, the one that had called her a failed reconstruction, a corpse undergoing the spreading, a body too broken to hold, beside all of it, in the closing record of the survey, in the difficult record itself where it would be read for as long as there was a Concord to read, Reconstructor Vole of the Stillhand Order wrote the last line of the survey of Mara Quinlan. And he wrote it plainly, the way the Prime had taught him to state a finding. Because the plain statement of a true thing was the whole of his profession, and he had nearly forgotten it, and a human had reminded him. The patient's wounds did not fail to heal. They healed and then continued past healing. The instrument read this as death because the instrument had no setting for a body that improves. Correct the instrument. Do not correct the patient. There was never anything wrong with the patient. There was only ever something incomplete in us. Then he opened the lock. The human freight runner cast off from Hesperval on the following rotation, and Vole watched it go from the observation gallery. A battered, ugly-working ship, human-built, all function and no grace. Exactly the kind of ship that would crawl into a dead hull for a paycheck. And somewhere in its cargo hold a salvage-tech second class was already working, already useful, already carrying her grief underground where her world had taught her to carry it, already healing, in every way a body could heal. Faster than the ship could carry her home. He never saw her again. He had not expected to. She had said she would go home and never think about the Concord again, and Vole believed her, and found that he was glad, not because he wished to be forgotten, but because a human who never had to think about the Concord again was a human the Concord had gotten right in the end, after getting her so wrong for so long. The best outcome a mender could ever hope for was a patient who walked out and did not need to look back. She was that. He let her go. The season turned. Isa knit, slowly, in the kind, warm way of her kind, and came out of her recovery field weaker and older, and Vole thought better, the way Mara had promised. Her hands steady now in a way they had not been before the bulkhead, steady the way hands got steady only after they had been through the thing they were most afraid of and done the work anyway. She became a fine mender. She kept a small recording of the human's discharge day words in her personal log, and Vole knew because she told him, years later, that she played it back on the hard rotations, the ones where a body came in that the ring could not save, the ones that filled the hours a mender carried. Do the work. Be kind to the scared ones. That's the whole thing. She said it steadied her. Vole believed it. The keeper of the difficult record retired within the season, and the new instrument setting went out to every ring in the Concord, and the notes that came with it were careful and humane, and taught a generation of menders that a body running too hot to be alive was not a corpse but a mystery, and to watch the patient always over the machine. Vole never learned for certain whether the keeper wrote them. He chose to believe it. He had watched the old mender fold his spine in the deep ward, the old startled posture that also meant reverence. That meant I have met the edge of what I know. And Vole had decided that a being capable of that gesture was a being capable of writing the thing he most did not want to know so that no one after him had to learn it the hard way. Perhaps that was generous. Vole had learned from a human to be generous with the ones who could still change, because there were more of them than fear wanted anyone to believe. And being right about that was the only thing that made the volume survivable. He rose in time to Prime of the Ring, when Toon went to the central rings to teach. He trained a great many menders. He told all of them the same thing on their first rotation, the thing he had nearly forgotten and a gutted salvage-tech had given back to him, and he told it plainly, because the plain statement of a true thing was the whole of the profession. Trust the patient over the instrument. Always. When the two disagree, the instrument is telling you the limit of what we have built, and the patient is telling you the truth. We build the instruments. We do not build the truth. The day you forget which is which, you will call a living thing dead because it healed in a way your machine could not imagine, and it will lie there getting better while you record the hour of its death, and you will not deserve to wear the order. They thought he was being dramatic, the young ones on their first rotation. Most of them. And then, one season or another, a body would come through their lock that did not read the way the machine insisted a body should read, and they would remember the strange flat certainty in the old prime's voice, and they would look at the patient instead of the number. And some of them, the good ones, the ones who would last, would turn the alarm off and watch and learn. Vole kept one thing from all of it, a private thing not in any record. On the hard rotations, the ones that filled his own hours, when a body came in too broken to hold, and the creed made him try anyway, and the trying failed the way trying sometimes did. He thought about a small warm furnace of a body on a cradle asking after a dead crewmate's grandchildren, and about the woman it had belonged to walking off his ring in a gray wrap with a dead man's tools under her arm, healed stronger in every place the world had broken her, wanting nothing from the whole vast frightened conquered, but to be let alone and to get home. She had gotten home. Vole was as sure of that as he was of anything. Somewhere out past the transfer lanes, on the hardest world in the surveyed volume, a salvage-tech had knocked on a door at the Halden Yards and handed a woman her father's tools and told 3 children the true and kindly version of how their grandfather died. And then she had gone back to work, because scrap did not pull itself. And she had never once thought about the aliens who spent 6 rotations mistaking the healthiest thing they had ever seen for a dying one. That was the finding. Vole had written it plainly, and it was true, and he never improved on it, though he lived a long time and treated a great many patients, and read a great many instruments that told him a great many lies. There was never anything wrong with the patient. There was only ever something incomplete in us.